Got it. All right, good evening. We have a quorum. So if everybody can take their seats, we'll get started. Thank you all for attending, and thank the folks at home for viewing with us. Several preliminary matters. I'll read a return of the warrant, indicating that the voters were notified and the inhabitants were notified and qualified to vote. The town meeting would convene this evening starting at 7 p.m. The warrant was served, posted true copies, attested to the warrant in the town hall as directed by the constable and signed off by the town clerk. Two preliminary matters, if I could. The first is I want to apologize to anybody who was inconvenienced by the rescheduling of town meeting from last Monday until this Monday. That was entirely based on my inability to keep track of my home schedule, my work schedule, and the town meeting schedule. And I apologize for the need to reconvene so that I could be here this evening. The second is I want to acknowledge that Dan Alford's term on the Finance Committee is coming to an end. Those of you who are regular attendees know that Dan has been an active participant in these meetings and served with distinction on the Finance Committee, and I want to acknowledge his tenure here and wish him the best of luck on behalf of all of us as he starts his term on the school committee. So thank you, Dan. Before we address Article 1, I want to deal with the traditional motion that we deal with, allowing the town meeting to consider allowing non-residents to speak at the town meeting. So it's moved that the following non-residents and non-voting town officials and consultants to committees be allowed to speak during the course of this annual town meeting. Rather than enumerate them all, simply identify that those are the individuals, 23 in number, that are listed in the warrant, with the exception of the library director, for whom would substitute Derek Wilson. So is there a motion to town meetings, a vote is required of town meeting under our bylaw to allow non-residents to speak? Do we have a motion to allow those individuals to speak? Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, so voted. As we've done during the past year or two, I'm going to ask town meeting to consider the adoption of what's called the consent agenda. And under the consent agenda, after a discussion with the affected town officials and town boards, we're asking the town to consider the expedited consideration of what we consider routine items, articles that require town meeting. They come up each year. There's invariably no debate, although debate is certainly permissible on them. But in the interest of preserving the town meeting's time for debate on articles that truly warrant debate, we'll ask you to consider lumping together for consideration Articles 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 for approval in a single vote without debate. I'll read each article's number and title, and if 7 members of the meeting rise to say hold, the item will be removed so they'll be debated in the normal course. The remaining articles will be considered individually as printed in the warrant. Article 3 authorizes the treasurer collector to sell foreclosed tax title properties. Article 4 is a tax work-off program under Chapter 59, Section 5K and 5N. Article 5 authorizes the Select Board to sell surplus equipment. Article 6 amends the interest rate per annum. Article 7 amends the income requirements. Article 8 provides for veterans tax exemptions. Article 9 establishes the personal property tax limit of $5,000. And Article 10 presents the revolving fund spending fund limits. The motion is moved to approve the articles in the consent agenda as those articles are printed in the warrant. Is there a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Article 1, to hear the report of the Select Board. Copies of the Select Board's report are available at the voter check-in tables in the hall and online. They'll be available at Town Hall after town meeting if you like. In the back of both the town report and warrant document, you'll find a citizen volunteer form, and both can be filled out manually and dropped off at the town clerk's office and will be entered in the new volunteer database for any of you who have spare time and want to donate your time to the town. Additionally, a volunteer database form is now available online. You'll find a reminder on the back of the warrant document, a form to update contact info, and the town's Blackboard notification system. I call on the chairman of the board, it's the Select Board, to give us a brief presentation for town meeting, please. Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to town meeting this evening. It's May 15th. My name is Ben Sparrow. I am the chair of the select board. Make sure my clicker's working. Yes. Just to talk a little bit about what the priorities of the select board are. We have been very busy this past year as we look to improve the quality of life for all residents. And I did receive some feedback in October to not go through every article, so I'm going to just make this about bigger overarching themes tonight. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was fire EMS updates, implementing a study that was done by MRI, Municipal Resources Incorporated, on the fire and EMS departments. We're moving towards an advanced life support certification, and there is an addition of an assistant fire chief in this budget for FY24, and this is going to help move the organization in the direction of ALS certification. And there's other recommendations for changes to standard operating procedures and such. This is an ongoing process that takes time, several years in fact, and we're in the first year of that work. And I want to give much appreciation and gratitude to those first responders who are a part of this organization and that have given dedication and feedback as this moves forward. And particularly I want to call out Chief Cassidy for his leadership and dedication to the department and the town. Also, changes for public safety is we're moving in the direction of a regional dispatch model, or a REC, for fire, EMS, and police. The select board approved the move towards that particular model as of January 1st, 2024. Sherburne has already done the transition, and we're watching them closely to see where they have any challenges, and so we can work forward to overcome them. And the state supports us with grants to make this happen. And a big part of that is the reduction in capital investment that's required to be up to $4 million in capital investments if the town did it itself. But instead, the state's taking over that. So it's very helpful, and it will mean no change in service for residents, and it will save the town money long term. For police, with the dispatch moving off-site, there's some operational changes that need to take place. The police station is unique because it is the only building in the town that is open 24/7, 365. So in order to maintain those high standards of service, it's important that we add several new officers, and that's in the budget that you'll have before you right now. We're going to ensure that there's adequate resources for town meeting consideration in the future for addressing traffic enforcement and other community needs. And thanks particularly to Chief Stone for his leadership and management of his department. Public Works, the grounds crew that this body supported last year has been up and running and doing a great job getting the parks cleaned up for spring. We've seen a lot of great feedback about that, so we're very happy with that process. Want to also give a congratulations to Highway Superintendent Robert Walker and DPW Director Sean Reese for their leadership, and they received recently an annual innovation award from MassDOT, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, for the Washington Street Crosswalk Improvement Project. And town meeting has approved the project funding, and this award recognizes that collaborative focus in safety and access. So thanks to Robert and Sean, and congratulations on receiving that award. I think there's only one in the state that was distributed, so they were the only ones in the state to get an award like that. So congratulations to them. Further in this budget, you'll see there's actually an addition of an economic development coordinator looking to improve relations with the business community and to attract new businesses and for inspiring new economic activity in the future. Youth and Family Services recently received a grant for $625,000 for a drug-free community to develop, enhance, and prevent vulnerable youth from misusing substances, and that's good for the next 5 years. So that's an important new program that we've been able to get. And this body helped support the initiative to get that grant. We funded the grant writer. And the Council on Aging Senior Center, they're seeking to expand services and opportunities post-COVID. And take this opportunity to thank Jackie Weiner for her leadership and dedication in the Youth and Family Services, and thanks to Lisa Borchetta for bringing services and community to the Senior Center and the seniors in town. There was a working group recently established last year to help iron out some of the differences in capital with our friends at the Finance Committee. And initially, it just had members of the Finance Committee and Select Board as part of it. Last October, there was an article to help correct some of the ADA compliance issues with our sidewalks. And there was also, recently, we've added some school committee members to that working group, and that work that was done led to some compromises that you're going to see in this warrant, particularly about a DPW facility and sidewalk improvements. The intention here is to utilize capital reserves and borrowing within the budget and outside of the budget to minimize the impact on taxpayers, but still move forward with infrastructure improvements. And the intention also is to ensure that if there's going to be work to be done on this building, the high school, that there's room within the budget and within the taxpayer's pocket to do so. So getting into a little more detail, for Article 21, we're talking about a DPW facility. I'm not sure if any of you saw some of the folks from the consultant, Weston and Sampson, out in the lobby. But right now, what we're doing is we're using two facilities, one on Central Street and one on Arch Street, and I'm being generous when I say they're well beyond their useful life. So what this board, my board has done is approved using Axton Cross, 20 Cross Street, as a potential new site for facility. However, that site is still in land court, so it's going to take a little bit of time for that to come out of land court. And when that does happen, we want to hit the ground running and move forward. This particular project is intended, again, to use cash and borrowing and to try to minimize the impact on taxpayers. And there's going to be an upcoming ballot question, as well as, if approved by this body this evening, there will be a ballot question next Tuesday at the election. So please make sure you go out and vote next Tuesday to support the articles if you're so inclined. Further, there's also infrastructure improvements to water, roadways, drainage, and sidewalks. The intention is to have the water project drive the infrastructure improvement, and again, using cash and borrowing. This is intended to accelerate the pace of some of these projects rather than taking over 10 years to get them, to complete them within perhaps 5 years, and all the while, again, minimizing the impact on the taxpayer, but also maximizing benefits to residents to open up parts of the community to each other. And this will also be a question on the ballot next week as well, if it's approved by by town meeting. A little bit about Article 29, a tree ordinance. The Garden Club has done a great job in bringing this idea forward and making Holliston a Tree City USA. And this is one step in the process. And it's meant to be, one of them is creating bylaws to support protecting trees. This ordinance is meant for trees on public land unless the activity requires a stormwater or land disturbance permit from the planning board. And the planning board, the tree warden, and the select board all have important roles to play in this process of protecting trees and the green spaces in our community. A little bit about Article 25, Goodwill Park. This project is being championed by the Parks and Recreation Board, and it's supported by the CPC, and which means funded. And this is part of basically the anchors to a downtown corridor. So it would start at Goodwill Park, go down Central Street, and end up at Blair Square. And as I'm sure many of you have seen, Blair Square is almost finished. This body supported doing work on Blair Square, I forget when, but it was not too long ago. And the pavilion will be installed in June, but that work is substantially completed. There's wonderful landscaping. It's a beautiful space. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend that you do. Part of this also will be putting parking at 9 Green Street. That project should be beginning any day now. In addition, there is some work that will be done on the Central Street Fire Station, fixing the front of that fire station, and that should be starting again any day now. And we're also talking about employing the wastewater treatment plant to potentially bring sewers to downtown. There's a feasibility study at this point, and including modernization of the plant currently. A little bit more, there was a project that was recently completed. There is a water treatment plant at well number 5 on Central Street. I had the privilege of touring the facility the other day and getting a chance to see it. So these pictures are actually mine. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for supporting this project and the treatment plant and bringing clean water to residents. So thank you. Further project updates, there's street lights, where the street lights are being converted to LED. It's an ongoing process. Town meeting had originally approved money for that process. However, I want to give thanks to our technology director, who's sitting right back there, Chris Mayo, who helped get a Green Communities grant to help offset some of that expense and return some of the money to the town. Pinecrest Golf Course, there's updates to the clubhouse, pro shop, restaurant, and there's actually an article in here about improving the course itself, which is a revenue driver for the town. And the town solar project on the Old Town landfill on Marshall Street should be starting very soon. And I want to give thanks to our facilities manager, James Keese, for all his efforts to improve facilities and create more energy efficient solutions for the town. An update on ARPA spending. There's several areas of ARPA spending, including equity-focused services. Originally, full-day kindergarten was included in the equity-focused services, but this budget includes full-day kindergarten within the budget, so some of that money will be returned to ARPA to be reallocated elsewhere. There's a public health response for cleaning and sanitizing, PPE, and contact tracing from the Board of Health. Economic response, the food pantry freezer, evaluation of the EDC, which is where we got the information to create that position that we had talked about for the budget, and offsetting some of the HCAT revenue loss. I do want to particularly call out there's a home repair program that we were able to put in place for some folks who, through the senior center, who are having a little bit of trouble maybe with being able to get some upgrades and some changes to their houses that they were badly needed, and we were able to put some money towards it through ARPA, and it was coupled with Habitat for Humanity, and we've been able to do several projects thus far, and there's a few more in the works. So that's a particular call out for Lisa Borchetta and the Senior Center and folks for leading the way on providing those kinds of services to people who needed it. So thank you. Further, there's some infrastructure capital investments. Again, the wastewater treatment plant, town hall septic, and some repairs to the Holliston Historical Society. A few further project updates and information. If town meeting approves the DPW facility this evening and then it gets approved at the ballot next week, the town will move as quickly as possible upon taking the land at Axton Cross. And then once the project is completed or at a suitable space, then we can decide as a community what to do with the existing facilities on Arch Street and Central Street. So we can see what kinds of ideas we have. That's a little ways away, but that's something that's going to be coming down the pipe. Further, there is the changes to Woodland Street, as many of you know, probably inconvenienced by. We're looking for a long-term solution for the dam and the bridge and try to move as quickly as possible to make that happen. And for the wastewater treatment plant and potential sewers downtown, there should be some forums coming up to talk to people who are affected by any potential sewers or the businesses downtown to get their feedback and get them part of this process. And I want to reiterate and say expressly, too, the town is going to aggressively pursue any and all grant opportunities to try to offset the impact on taxpayers. We had a few departures. The treasurer collector, Mary Bosquet, retired. Our town accountant, Sharon Emmerich, moved on to another opportunity in another community. So we want to take the opportunity to welcome our new finance director, treasurer, Chris Hamons. And our new town accountant, Geeta Patel, should be starting in the coming weeks as well. And before I close, I wanted to give a particular thank you to the people who put in an incredible amount of work into making this warrant and this evening happen, and that's our Town Administrator, Travis Ahern, Assistant Town Administrator, Kathleen Buckley, and the Town Administrator staff, Donna Muzzy and Peg Driscoll. So I wanted to say thank you to them for all the work that they did to make this happen, so thanks. And thanks to the Community Action Fund for offering childcare to people who are attending this evening as well. So thank you all for coming tonight, and I'm going to say it again. Make sure you vote next Tuesday. We have two articles tonight that are going to be ballot questions next week, so hopefully you can support us this evening and then support us again next Tuesday. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.
Thank you, Ben. The motion for this article is moved that the annual report for the town for the 12-month period of time, period ending June 30th, 2022, be accepted. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, so voted. Article 2, to hear and act on the report of the FinCom. We'll take the order as it should be in this one. The motion is moved that the annual report of the FinCom be received. Is there a second? Second. All those in, strike that. Is there a second? Second. Okay, it's open for discussion. Mr. Shada?
One of these days I'm going to have to replace this laptop. I've been on the Finance Committee too long to have a laptop this old. But, okay, so Ben, I will start by saying that I heard the same comments Ben did last time, so I'm going to try my best to make sure that I kept this much shorter than I have in previous years. So let's start talking about money. Okay. So this year, as I do every year, I start talking about where the state is going with state aid. And the reason I do that is because that's a big component of our budget. When you look at net state aid, and I've been on the committee long enough that this graph doesn't require much updating anymore, you see one very nice trend over the last few years, which is you see a big jump in state aid over the last 3 years, fiscal years. Of course, the fiscal 24 number isn't final yet, but this is where it's probably going to end up somewhere close to this. That's the good news. Now let's talk about what that actually means for Holliston. Okay. Since fiscal 11, state aid's been growing at about 2.37% per year, but since 21, it's been growing at 4.17%. Very good. Problem is, in those same 3 years, inflation has been 6.15% per year. So in reality, state aid is still not keeping up with inflation, which has been my kind of mantra for the last decade, that while it's nice to see increases in state aid is not sufficient and not growing sufficiently for the town to rely on that income every year to help us improve rather than just maintain. Okay. Okay. In addition, as Ben alluded to, we have COVID aid money that we received over the years during the pandemic. Now the official state of emergency has ended on May 11th. All that aid is going away. The only thing that's still going is the ARPA money that Ben mentioned. That goes through the remainder of fiscal 24. But because of that, in reality, the town and many other towns around the country benefited from the largesse of the federal government through the state government as well, passing money to the municipalities. That money is going to go away. If you recall, I've said for many years the biggest worry that I have in my position is Proposition 2.5 and inflation. And that's simply because in a low inflation environment like we had for many, many years, Prop 2.5 works perfectly well. If inflation is 2% and you can raise taxes 2%, you can keep up. When inflation is 6% and the law says you can't raise more than 2.5%, you start falling behind. So that's the biggest concern we have as a town now. Okay. So when we started the budget process this year with Travis, we were looking at net state aid, as I just described. We looked at our local revenue, and based on the projections we had then, we assumed it was going to be up about 5.95%. We stayed with our traditional new growth model, which is the low watermark approach, because this eliminates the need for us to have to adjust if we don't hit our new growth targets. And if you look at the budget that you're going to be considering tonight, the total tax levy is up about 3.77%. Now, I won't go into the primer on why it's higher than 2.5%, but I will say that the bulk of that increase is the new growth that was captured last year. There was an additional 1.2 million above our projection in what I would call excess new growth above this low water mark. That was mostly due to business reevaluations that were done in '22. That's good. We got this extra 1.2 million added to the tax base. So it creates a one-year bump when it first occurs, but from now on that will be subject to 2.5 and will go, so you don't see this giant bump every year, you just see this bump once. But what that bump has allowed us to do is to address a few things in town. So I said revenue is as I just described. Our fixed costs are up about $445,000 this year for insurance and benefits. We're increasing the annual capital appropriation, or recommending that you increase the annual capital appropriation to $2.35 million. That's up $475,000 from last year, and the reason for that is because of what you just heard from Ben, is that there's possible debt service coming, so we're trying to grow that fund a little more aggressively to plan for potential future debt. Among our recommendations, we're also recommending continuing the permanent funding for the OPEB liability, which we have funded now for a decade at $1.5 million per year. That's built into the benefits budget. And of course, as I say every year, that has no incremental impact to the operating budgets because it was funded from savings elsewhere initially, and we don't need to raise it every year, so there's no need for any incremental money. So we remain cautious on the financial side, and we continue to move towards sustainability. As I said, you've probably heard me say this every year, but that's the ultimate goal. Is we've built up our reserves, we're trying to improve our position financially, but we're trying to make sure we maintain the achievements we've got to date, and that we move towards sustainability in the budgets so that we can just use the tax base to fund our operations. Okay. The operating budget has a few things I figured I'd tell you about tonight. One is that 1.2 million that we got, one of the first things we chose to do with it, or we're recommending doing with it, is addressing full funding for tuition-free full-day kindergarten at the schools. As you may recall, the plan when we first went to tuition-free full-day kindergarten was we were using federal funds that had a limited duration, and the plan was to transition this into the school budget over a period of a couple of years until the funding from the federal government ran out, and then the town had to assume full responsibility. Because we had this bump, and we knew that the impact to the schools might be a little troublesome in the year the federal funding went away, we approached, Travis approached the schools and said, let's talk about doing this now while we have the opportunity. So if the budget as presented is approved tonight, this will codify into the school budget free full-day kindergarten going forward without a funding cliff. In addition, it funds 3 officers for the police department. That's related to the move to the regional dispatch that Ben alluded to earlier. We have additional hours for the library and assessing staff that we're recommending. For the assessing staff, it's to help them catch up on some backlogs that they need to do. The library is also to transition, increase hours of a few employees, but also to transition one position from a grant-funded position into the operating budget, because philosophically the Finance Committee doesn't like funding people out of grants, permanent positions, I should say, out of grants. And as Ben also mentioned, there's $37,000 in there for economic development, for this additional staffing. The only reason I'm pointing this out, because you might say, well, what's $37,000, not that much, but I'm pointing that out because if you look at what their budget was, it was $14,000 last year, so this is a more than doubling of their budget, right? It's a significant increase. The wage table in Article 14 reflects a 1.5% COLA and some other new positions, but basically it's a 1.5% COLA, and the budget you're seeing tonight results in no service reductions in any budget. On the school side, our recommendation is that the town approve $40,529,934. Make sure I'm on the right page. Yes, okay. That's an increase of about 4.34% over FY23, and as I said, it fully funds free full-day kindergarten for the town. We're also recommending in the capital article $757,000 in May capital, because obviously we do more capital in October, for the schools, and that is to cover the roofing at Placentino and Miller School. And of course, we're recommending the ongoing OPEB trust funding. Okay, speaking of OPEB, which is why I put that on the last slide, since 2015, we've had the funds invested in the Mass Pension Reserves Investment Trust, otherwise known as PRIT. As of our last valuation, which is done every 2 years as of June 30th of that year, so our last valuation was June 30th of 2022, our fund value was just over 22 million, close to 22.5. Our liability actually increased, and I will say that's because when you do these valuations, they make assumptions about costs and things, and those change in each valuation based on the new knowledge that they have. So sometimes the liability goes up, sometimes it goes down. In this particular valuation, it was largely driven by increases in staffing. We had more employees than we had in the last valuation, and that resulted in increased liability. So right now, our liability stands, according to this report, about $60 million. That puts us at a funded ratio of about 37.5%, which is one of the top funding ratios in the state. If we continue with the $1.5 million, according to that valuation, we'll be fully funded in 2040. And if you recall, way back in 2013, I went and looked this up actually because I was trying to remember what year I said it. In 2013, I presented a slide during this talk where I said, we're going to begin the official funding of OPEB, 30 years, $1.5 million. So good that we've maintained it for 10 whole years now. That's good. We're a third of the way through it, and it's showing that in the fact that our funded ratio is significantly better than it was when we started. And as I said, the valuation is done every other year, so our next valuation will be done on June 30th of 2024. Okay. So I'm not going to go through every article. I'm just going to talk about the ones that have notable financial impact. Obviously, the omnibus budget has a tremendous amount of financial impact. The only thing I wanted to point out here is that we are recommending the continuation of the $1.5 million OPEB funding. Article 17 with the capital spending, we have a number of items there that are listed as facilities. I just wanted to point out that as Ben talked about James Keast managing our facilities, those items that show up under facilities, they're described in the back of the warrant. They are little individual pages that describe what those expenses are. And those are all coming from the capital plan and the capital planning that has taken place over the last few years. So those are not kind of things are breaking necessarily. These are, we now have a real capital plan in place, and we're trying to make sure things are getting replaced as they need to be. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the $757,000 for the new roofing at Placentino and Miller. In Article 23, there's $200,000 from the Pinecrest revolving fund, so that does not impact the omnibus budget in any way. That's the revolving fund that gets money from the fees for the golf course and is used to fund the golf course improvements. And in Article 25, I wanted to point that out as well because that's the improvements to Goodwill Park that Ben talked about. But that $1.1 million is coming from the CPC. If you look at your tax bill, you'll see the little 1.5% CPC funding. That money is being used to pay for these improvements if the town approves it tonight. Okay. And just briefly on the override articles, I just want to clarify the FinCom supported both of these. There are two articles that are tied to the vote next week at the town election. Approving the articles themselves doesn't impact the override because the override still must be approved by the voters next Tuesday. Article 21 is for the new DPW, as Ben mentioned, and the plan is to fund 25% of that cost via the override. If the override were to fail next Tuesday, then the project would not proceed because there wouldn't be sufficient funding. Article 22, which is the sidewalk, water sidewalk infrastructure override, that addresses Norfolk Central and Goulding Streets, as Ben showed in this chart, and is also in your warrant. The one thing I wanted to point out about that is that if you look at the Finance Committee recommendation for that article, there's Article 21, our recommendation specifies that the recommendation is fully contingent on the passage of the vote next week. You look at our recommendation for 22, there's a part of it that is appropriated tonight regardless of the outcome of the vote, and then there's another part that is appropriated subject to the vote. The reason that that's done that way is because there are multiple funding sources in this particular article, including the override. So there's water infrastructure fees, that go towards the water main replacement. When they do water main replacement, they do replacement of the road and the sidewalks that are existing as part of the project. So those things will continue regardless of what happens next Tuesday, unlike the DPW facility. So it's just important that when you look at the votes we're taking, approving both articles does in no way impacts what happens with the vote next week. It just pre-appropriates the money should the votes pass next week. Okay. In summary, it kept up with me the whole time. Okay. The budget you see that you have in your warrant still reflects fiscal discipline while sustaining the level of service that the town expects. And as I said, you could make an argument that we're actually improving service this year by making kindergarten fully free for everybody, as among other things. And just as a reminder, the Finance Committee meets every Tuesday at 7 during budget season. During the rest of the year, and certainly before town meetings, we're meeting regularly, but sometimes in the slower budget months, we're not meeting every week. We've remained virtual, even though we don't have to at this point, because two things we learned during the pandemic. One was, when we were meeting in person, it was a 50-50 shot as to whether we were covered by HCAT, so most of our meetings were on TV. And we also noticed that nobody ever came to our meetings when we held them in person. When we've had them virtually, not only are they all recorded so that any of you can go watch them, but we found that more people, we've seen increased public participation, so we've been meeting virtually because of that. We have our finance section on the town website, and of course, all these budgets that you're talking about tonight, throughout the entire process, are presented. There are links on the town website to see every budget that we're considering as the requests are made. And we have our email that you see there. So basically, the message from everything tonight is that we've made it through the pandemic okay, which is good. And that was because we exercised fiscal restraint at the beginning, and then there was a flood of money from the federal government after that. The problem now is inflation. And as I said, that's the biggest threat. And if you were to talk to anybody on the Finance Committee or the town administrator about fiscal 25, I think there's already universal acknowledgement that that will be a more challenging year than this year was. We hope it's not in the end, because sometimes we get lucky. But overall, the town is doing okay. We've weathered the storm, and as long as we kind of stay the course on all the things we've put in place, I think we'll be moving towards better and stronger financial positioning going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. The underlying motion is that we accept the annual report of the FinCom as received. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? If not, then all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. As a result of our action on the consent agenda, we can skip ahead to Article 12. To see if the town will vote to raise an appropriate... Excuse me? 11? Article 11, excuse me. Team effort up here. Compensation for elected officials. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds for the purposes of fixing the salaries and compensation of all elected officers of the town effective July 1, 2023, which salaries and compensations are printed below. Board of Assessors, FY23 was $5,000. That will be reduced to $2,500, as I recall, as a result of a study of comparable communities and what they pay their assessors. The Select Board, the stipend will be reduced from $125 down to $50, and the town clerk's salary, including certification, will be increased from $81,860 to $90,000. FinCom recommends favorable action unanimously, 7-0. The motion is move that the town fix these salaries and compensation of all elected officers of the town for fiscal year 24 at $92,550 as presented in Article 11 of the warrant. Is there a second? The town clerk's salary was discussed with the chairs of the FinCom and Select Board for comparison to the market in light of the regulatory changes at the state level, which have increased the workload of the clerk's offices in the Commonwealth, including early voting and mail-in changes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, what's that? Reconsidering what, sir? It's not reconsideration. The article is open for discussion. Who's this guy?
Sorry,
That's all right. No, that's all right. We encourage participation. Don't be discouraged. Just give us your name and address, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Hello, I'm Kevin Daigle, 35 Dalton Road, Holliston. And I just wanted to come up and speak to the town clerk salary. On behalf of everyone in this town and the great work that our town clerk has done for us, quietly, confidently, intelligently, and professionally. A lot of towns out there do not have the good, what's the word I'm looking for?
I can't help you with a choice of words, sir. I would.
I'm struggling up here for a second, but
That's all right. Go ahead.
the skill, yeah. Yeah, so we have an elected town clerk who is a professional town clerk. A lot of other towns do not have the benefit of such a professional in that position. The fact that we have not read articles about our town and are able to have town meetings like this that are put together so nicely, executed well with all the pamphlets and packets, not to mention the election cycles that have put a giant magnifying glass on the position, not only locally but nationally. So based on the numbers that are presented tonight, I feel like if you look across not only Massachusetts but at the federal level, a professional in a position of immense scrutiny, power that requires a considerable amount of integrity to get the job done should be paid commensurate to her skills and abilities. So I would like to reconsider the increase in the pay of the town clerk to something more commensurate to a top-level professional in their field. So the number that I have in my mind is related to the government federal pay scale, which is $120,000. I understand that that is quite an increase. However, if we were able to increase it just a little bit, I think as members of the town, we'd be able to show our appreciation for all the work that this incredible person does for us. So, thank you.
Now, sir, before you leave, town meeting has your comments. If you want to make a specific motion seeking to amend the article to specify a certain amount, then you have to give me that amount and give it to us in writing. If you're satisfied that you've just spoken in support of this article, then the town meeting will vote on the article that's presented. You follow me?
I do, sir. Thank you. Yeah, I'm much better at writing than speaking. I hope that's clear. So I'll put this together in writing and submit it to the board. So thank you for your time.
So your motion is, so I understand it correctly, your motion is to amend the article to increase the compensation for the town clerk from the $90,000 that's been recommended to $120,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You got to give me that motion, please. Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second? Yes, okay, there's a second. It's open for discussion. Yes, Mr. Shader.
Ken Shader, 676 Fifth Street, long time no see. I would strongly urge you to reject this amendment. The amount that's presented was agreed upon by the town clerk and the chairman of the select board and myself in a meeting where we discussed compensation. We all agreed on this amount, so this was not raised as an issue. In addition, I would say, because this is a personnel matter, I would not go into issues of personnel in the office, but this was considered to be fair compensation based on job performance. And in addition, passing a motion like this would create huge inequities in the town among other employees. You'd have all the other employees to deal with that would feel that this was putting this position out of alignment with many other positions in town. So I would urge the town meeting to reject this and to keep the salary as presented in the article.
Further discussion? Yes. I heard a voice. Oh, yes, come right down. Take your time.
Hi, Joan Shaughnessy, 87 Morton Street. While I really appreciate your highlighting Liz and telling her how great she is. She is awesome, and we are very, very fortunate to have her. This is not the way you go about this. You really need to, I need to see the data. You just told me that the national average was this. And not that I don't trust you, but I see you have a volunteer badge, which makes me, it sort of looks like your friend of Liz's coming down to do her a solid. I'm sure she knew nothing about it. I really appreciate what you're trying to do here, and there's a protocol to these things, so I'm going to vote against you, but I like your spunk. Thanks.
Further discussion? Yes, Ben.
As chair of the select board, I did meet with the chair of the finance committee, and we met with Liz, and I do agree she's doing a great job as clerk, and the numbers that we looked at were based on the surrounding market, and that's where we came up with the number that we were all comfortable with and we all agreed upon. So I do agree that she is a good employee, does a great job with what she has been tasked to do, but I also think that we wanted to make sure that we kept it within the market. So thank you.
Further discussion? Now, for clarification, the motion that I've received varies slightly from the one that the gentleman gave me orally. It indicates that he proposes to change the amount of the salary on the amendment from the proposed number to $121,128. So I'll treat that as having been the initial motion to amend. And is there a second to that? Second. So it's open for discussion. Any further discussion? If not, then we'll take a vote first on the motion to amend, which I just read to you, to change the amount of the salary for the town clerk as the number proposed to $121,128. This calls for a majority vote. All those in favor, we'll try it on a voice vote first. All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay. That well-intentioned motion is defeated. We'll proceed to a vote on the main motion, which is that the town fix the salaries and compensation of all elected officers for the town for fiscal year 2024 at $92,550 as presented in Article 11 of the warrant. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Article 12, to pay unpaid bills, sponsored by the Select Board, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds a sum of money for unpaid bills from prior years or take any action relative thereto. The motion is moved that the town appropriate the sum of $475 from the reserve fund for the purpose of paying unpaid bills from prior fiscal years as specified in Article 12. As this requires a 4/5 vote of town meeting, we'll do it on a voice vote, and if it's not unanimous, we'll take a hand count. All those in favor say aye. I have to strike that. Is there a second to the motion? Second. Excuse me. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That's unanimous. So voted. Article 13, sponsored by the Select Board, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds a sum of money for the purpose of supplementing various accounts for the town's fiscal year 2023 annual operating budget previously voted by the town under Article 27 of the warrant for the May 9, 2022 annual town meeting, or take any action relative thereto. For the Snow and Ice Department, $11,750, and the source is identified as the reserve fund. DPW water operating, $60,000 from water retained earnings. Liability insurance, $24,938 from benefits insurance. Accountant operating, $10,000 from accountant salaries. Police operating, $40,000 from police salaries. Select board salaries, $3,400 from the building salaries, building inspector salaries. DPW highway salaries, $7,000 from the building inspection salaries. Treasurer collector salaries, $1,950 from unemployment line item. Parks and Rec, $1,150 from unemployment. Youth and Family Services, $300 from unemployment. The FinCom recommends that the town appropriate $11,750 from the reserve fund, $60,000 from water retained earnings, $24,938 from benefits, $10,000 from town accountant salaries, $40,000 from police salaries, $10,400 from building inspector salaries, and $3,400 from unemployment insurance for the purposes stated in the article. The motion is moved that the town approve the current fiscal year transfers as printed in Article 13 of the warrant. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, this requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed? So voted. Article 14, to amend the Consolidated Personnel Bylaws, Section 29, Job and Wage Classification Plan, to see if the town will vote to amend the Consolidated Personnel Bylaws, Section 29, Job and Wage Classification Plan by reflecting those revisions, deletions, or additions to be effective as of July 1, 2023, or take any action relative thereto. Once again, the FinCom recommend favorable action 7-0. The motion is moved that the Article 14 be approved as presented in the warrant. The explanation is as follows. The Consolidated Personnel Bylaw is updated annually and covers the pay scales of all non-union, full-time, part-time, and temporary employees of the town. These charts incorporate a 1.5% COLA adjustment for FY24 and 2 new positions developed and supported unanimously by the Select Board and FinCom, Assistant Fire Chief / EMS Director, and Economic Development Support Staff. Is there a second? Again, a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. And those opposed? So voted. We'll move now to Article 15, which is the fiscal year 24 omnibus budget. Yes. Sir. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, Ms. Talley. You couldn't hear me?
No
What?
discussion. You didn't ask for discussion.
I didn't ask for discussion? Oh. I'm sorry, Liz. It's already voted, but I'm going to extend you the courtesy of having you be heard on it. We'll re-vote it if we have to, following your
Voted.
comments.
So but can I make my comment?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Liz Bork, 17 Norland Street. I'm very happy to see that the Assistant Fire Chief is on the personnel list. This person will be responsible to improve Holliston's ambulance service and to move it to ALS, Advanced Life Support, which is the standard for the region. Presently, Holliston's ambulance average response time is much slower than surrounding towns. According to Chief Cassidy, Holliston's response time, as reported in the press, is 7 minutes and 22 seconds. Keep in mind that nationally, for EMS incidents, the standard of care based on stroke and cardiac arrest protocols is to have a unit on scene at a medical emergency within 6 minutes from the time of the 911 call. This is according to the MRI report. The following average response times were given to me in April by the respective fire chiefs in these towns. Ashland's average time is 5 minutes. Millis's average time is 3 to 5 minutes. Medway's time is 5 minutes. And Sherburne's time is 5 to 6 minutes. Therefore, Holliston is more than 2 minutes slower in some cases. It's not just a cliche that during critical, life-threatening situations, minutes and even seconds do count. Holliston needs at least 2 EMTs or paramedics at the station at all times. Why is Advanced Life Services so important to you and to your family? If there's a serious trauma in Holliston, Holliston depends upon other communities. A clear example is a deadly automobile accident in March, where paramedics from Ashland were present. When paramedics are presently required, this can produce extended response times that in some cases could have a lasting impact on patients. What does this mean to you and to your family, from the infant to the elderly? As I understand it, if there is a serious trauma, ALS is necessary, and you are going to wait until the paramedics come from Ashland, from Hopkinton, from Medway, or Millis, or a private ambulance service. For all of you and for your family's health and safety, Holliston cannot remain stagnant. Support all the efforts of the new Assistant Fire Chief, the town administration, to bring Holliston to advanced life support ambulance service as quickly as possible without time constraints. It's your health, it's your safety, it's your family's health, it's their safety, and minutes and seconds count. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. That article had been dealt with and voted, but thank you for your comments. I apologize, I didn't see you looking to be heard. I'll try to be a little more observant. Article 15? Yeah. Article 15, fiscal year 2024 budget is the omnibus budget article to see what money the town will vote to raise and appropriate from available funds to meet expenses and outlays to town departments, salaries of town offices, sundry and miscellaneous but regular expenditures for a reserve fund, and to appoint trustees or caretakers, or authorize the select board to appoint caretakers of the cemeteries of the town not otherwise provided for the ensuing year, or take any action relative thereto. The FinCom recommends favorable action for all amounts listed in the Level 4 recommended column of the omnibus budget, 7-0, with the exception of the library budget, which was also recommended for approval, 6-0, one abstention, with Mr. Alfred abstaining. And further, that $1.5 million of the employee benefit budget be used to fund the OPEB Trust 4-3, with Winston, Robertson, and Whitaker opposed. The motion is move that, and I'm deleting an explanation from me. You've heard from Mr. Shader earlier and from the board with the explanations for respect to the operating budget. The motion is move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $68,337,994 and appropriate the sum of $4,235 from receipts reserved for appropriation related to previous bond premium, and that a further appropriate the sum of $3,399,681 from the Water Enterprise Fund, specifically $2,999,681 from water rate revenue, and $400,000 from water retained earnings to meet the expenses and outlays for town departments, salaries of town offices, sundry and miscellaneous but regular expenditures for a reserve fund, and for all other expenses of the town not otherwise provided for, with all department expenses as reflected in the Level 4 column of the omnibus budget as presented in the warrant document on pages 52 through 55. Is there a second? Okay, we'll go through each department budget, and I'll call for a vote, yea or nay, on each budget, itemizing personnel and operating. Select Board, personnel, $324,226, operating, $102,500, for a total proposed budget for the Select Board of $426,726. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. FinCom, personnel, $4,000, operating, $210, for a total budget of $4,210. Any discussion? Seeing all those in favor, say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Reserve Fund, $325,000. Discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Town Accountant, personnel, $163,161. Operating budget, $37,500, for a total of $200,661. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye, please. Those opposed? So voted. The Board of Assessors, personnel, $207,923. Operating budget, $87,218. For a total of $295,141. No discussion. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Office of Treasurer Collector, personnel, $326,194. Operating budget, $60,620. For a total of $386,814. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Human Resources, Personnel, $126,926. The operating budget, $24,260, for a total budget of $151,186. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Technology, Personnel, $119,656. Operating budget, $157,701. Capital outlay, $45,976, for a total budget for Technology Department of $323,333. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Town Clerk, Personnel, $168,709. Operating budget, $11,344. Total budget for the department, as proposed, is $180,053. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Elections, Personnel, $25,694. Operating, $16,095. Total for elections, $41,789. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Conservation Commission, Personnel, $62,096. Operating, $4,150. Total, $66,246. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Planning Board, Personnel, 109, and I apologize for the mundane nature of this, but it's a lot of money that we're spending. We have to go through each department by section. Planning Board, Personnel, $109,697. Operating budget, $5,050. Total for the department, $114,747. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. The Zoning Board, Personnel, $7,213. Operating budget, $3,875, for a total for the department of $11,088. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Economic Development, $50,000 for personnel. Operating, $1,000, for a total of $51,000. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Sustainability, whatever that means, $51,500 for the departmental budget. I'm in favor of sustainability. I'll offer that unsolicited. Any discussion? If not, then all those in favor of $51,500 for sustainability, say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Police Department, Personnel, $3,324,429. Operating, $251,308. Capital outlay, $1,435, for total departmental budget of $3,577,172. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Those of you who were here last year will recognize what a difference a year makes. Auxiliary Police, total $16,002. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Fire Department, Personnel, $843,390. Operating, $145,145. Capital outlay, $35,000. Total for the Fire Department, $1,023,535. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Ambulance, Personnel, $708,352. Operating, $198,150. Total, $906,502 for the Ambulance Department. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Building Inspection, Personnel, $213,689. Operating, $19,200. Capital outlay, $500, for total departmental proposed budget of $233,389. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Emergency Management, Personnel, $10,000. Operating, $12,061, for a total of $22,061. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Animal control, $38,000, total budget. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, so voted. DPW, highway, personnel, $1,058,403, operating, $357,233, capital outlay, $300,000 for total departmental proposed budget of $1,715,636. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Facilities maintenance, personnel, $103,540, operating, $215,757, total departmental budget proposed of $319,297. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Snow and ice, personnel, $50,000, operating, $200,000, for total proposed budget of $250,000 for snow and ice. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Street lighting, proposed budget is $99,820. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Solid waste, total $1,474,188. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Wastewater treatment, $106,275. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Motor vehicle fuels, total $176,500. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Board of Health, personnel, $165,091. Operating budget, $8,450. For total for the Board of Health, $173,541. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Council on Aging, personnel, $223,146. Operating, $61,915. For total council COA budget of $285,061. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Youth and Family, personnel, $154,323. Operating, $19,170. For total for Youth and Family of $173,493. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Veteran Services, benefits, $50,000. Operating, $47,207. Total, $97,207. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, so voted. Library, personnel, $436,469. Operating budget, $188,300. Total for the library, $624,769. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. We're in the home stretch. Parks and Rec, personnel, $153,948. Total for the Park and Rec, $153,948. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. The Rail Trail, total $5,000. No discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Celebrations, $2,500. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. County retirement, $2,611,009. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Workers' compensation, $380,969. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Unemployment, $50,000. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Employee benefits, $8,364,143. All those in favor say aye. Oh, sorry. Yes, Ken. Excuse me.
You failed to read this in the original motion, but that, in that employee benefits budget with the stipulation that $1.5 million goes into the OPEB trust.
Okay. Do we have that?
Yes, it's in the bottom line on that,
Okay.
on the motion.
It's in the bottom line of the motion?
Yep.
We made it, and Ken did?
It wasn't, you didn't say it.
Oh,
We need to.
You just didn't read that, Bill, when you read the motion.
Got it. Okay, so let's make that clear. So the motion is going to say, as I had read, as presented in the warrant document on pages 52 to 55, with 1.5 million of the benefits budget allocated to the OPEB trust fund. Right, Ken?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the help. So town meeting, the employee benefits, the amount is $8,364,143, with 1.5 million dedicated to the fund, as Ken has indicated to us. Any further discussion? Thank you for that, Ken. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Liability insurance, $391,710. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. The subtotal for those articles totals $25,804,014. So let's have a confirmatory vote on that if we can. Is any discussion? If not, then all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Holliston Public Schools, total $40,529,934. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Keefe Technical School, total $1,529,189. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. And as a confirmatory vote, the educational subtotal is $42,059,123. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Debt service operating $4,000. Debt service subline $373,650. The total for the debt service budget is $377,650. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Those votes that we took total, that you took, strike that, I didn't take them, you took them, total $68,337,994. One final department to deal with is the Water Division Enterprise. Personnel, $872,110. Benefits, $280,623. Operating, $1,150,115. Debt service, $1,096,833, for total for the Water Division Enterprise of $3,399,681. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Thank you. And I should say, yes, it's a comment on the work of the boards, the affected boards and the FinCom, that we're able to effectively appropriate $68 million virtually by consent. We had to, I apologize, we had to take each line item. It would be presumptuous to take a consent vote on a matter of that significance. But thank you, department heads, for their work on that. Transfer, Article 16, transfer from available funds a sum of money for the capital expenditure fund, sponsored by the Select Board, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds a sum of money for the capital expenditure fund or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends that the town raise $2,350,000 from the tax levy for the capital expenditure fund. The vote was unanimous, 7-0. The motion is moved that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $2,350,000 for the capital expenditure fund. Is there a second? Second. And the explanation, in furtherance of what was explained previously, is that it's been the custom of the town to annually transfer from reserves a sum of money to the capital expenditure fund to be used at the October special town meeting to fund capital expenditure requests. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Capital expenditures. To see if the town, Article 17, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds or borrow a sum of money for the purpose of capital expenditures, including replacement and new vehicles and equipment for the schools, select board, facilities maintenance, fire, police, and public work departments, and authorize the select board to trade or sell used equipment to a part of the purchase price and to take any action relative thereto. The departments have been itemized, and I'll briefly state: the fire ambulance, assistant fire chief SUV and hybrid equipped for $70,000, Department Facilities Department, Town Hall, and ADA ramp for the front steps and landing for $75,000. Facilities Department, Town Hall, HVAC systems, $12,150. Facilities Department, Central Fire, HVAC improvements, $21,910. Facilities COA, Senior Center, HVAC systems, $12,500. Facilities Police Department, HVAC systems, $35,000. HPW Highway front-end loader with attachments, $220,000. HPW Highway snow and ice equipment, $36,500. HPW grounds equipment and attachments, $30,000. School, there were 2 schools that were identified as being roofed. Shingled roofs, $757,000 for a total of $1,270,060. The FinCom recommends the town appropriate that sum from the capital expenditure fund for the items listed in the article by unanimous vote. The motion is moved that the town appropriate the sum of $1,270,060 from the capital expenditure fund for the purposes listed in Article 17 of the warrant. This requires a 2/3 majority because we're utilizing capital expenditure funds. We'll take a voice vote first. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That's unanimous. So voted. Article 18, transfer from available funds a sum of money for the General Stabilization Fund. Sponsored by the Select Board, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds a sum of money for the Stabilization Fund or take any action relative thereto. The FinCom recommends indefinite postponement unanimously. The motion is to move to indefinitely postpone Article 18 in the warrant. Any discussion? If not, those all in favor of indefinite postponement say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Excuse me? Do we have a second on that? Let's, for the purpose of the record, Selectwoman Hine. Second, Mr. Corona, thank you. Article 19, a transfer from available funds a sum of money for the Programmatic Stabilization Fund. Sponsored by the Select Board, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the Programmatic Stabilization Fund or take any action relative thereto. The FinCom recommends the town appropriate $63,599 from free cash for the purposes stated in the article, unanimously voted. The motion is moved that the town transfer $63,599 from free cash for the purpose stated in Article 19 in the warrant. Is there a second? The explanation is that the Programmatic Stabilization Fund is used to kickstart the organizational changes that can demonstrate future decreased operational costs or increased non-tax revenue. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Establishment of capital stabilization account by South Middlesex Regional Vocational School, sponsored by the Select Board, to see if the town will vote to authorize the South Middlesex Regional Vocational Technical School, aka Keefe Regional Tech District Committee, to establish a capital stabilization account for the South Middlesex Regional Vocational Technical School, aka Keefe Regional Tech School, pursuant to Chapter 16G1/2 of Chapter 21 of the Mass General Laws, or take any action relative thereto. The FinCom unanimously recommended in favor of this article. The motion is moved to authorize the South Middlesex Regional Vocational Technical School Committee to establish a capital stabilization account for the South Middlesex Regional Vocational Technical School District pursuant to Section 16G1/2 of Chapter 71 of the Massachusetts General Laws. For those that are interested, the comment is the South Middlesex Voc School has been provided educational programs for Holliston students for years. Holliston students benefit from the academic and technical education and the technology application skills. Superintendent John Evans and staff are here to answer any questions if you have any. We thank Mr. Evans and the staff for attending. Any discussion? If not, then all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Mr. Evans, we take no offense if you leave before the end of the meeting. Article 21, Facility for Department of Public Works, Design and Engineering, Construction and Administration. Sponsored by the Select Board. The estimated total cost is $30 million. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sum of money for the purpose of designing and constructing a new facility for the Department of Public Works, in addition to decommissioning the 2 existing facilities located at Arch Street and Central Street for future public or private use, or take any action relative thereto. The FinCom's recommendation is as follows. Contingent upon a successful vote on the corresponding ballot questions on the May 24th election ballot, the FinCom recommends that the town appropriate $7 million from Capital Expenditure Fund and approve a borrowing authorization to be 75% non-excluded, or $17.25 million, and 25% excluded, or $5.75 million, for the proposed article at the 20 Cross Street location. It was unanimously voted. I'll spare you a further explanation. I believe the FinCom gave a very detailed explanation with respect to the support of it and support of the article. And all the $30 million is split as follows. $7 million in cash comes from the Capital Expenditure Fund. $17.25 million is from a borrowing, non-excluded. $5.75 million is borrowing excluded, requiring a ballot question on May 23rd. That total is a $30 million project cost estimate, including soft costs. The motion is as follows. Move that the town appropriate the sum of $7 million from the Capital Expenditure Fund and authorize the borrowing of an additional $23 million, with 75% or $17.25 million to be non-excluded debt and 25% or $5.75 million to be excluded debt, for the purpose stated in Article 21 of the warrant related to the property at 20 Cross Street, with both the appropriation and borrowing authorization contingent upon successful passage of a corresponding ballot question at the May 23rd, 2023 election. Is there a second? Second. This will require a two-thirds majority vote. I'm going to call for discussion if there is some. I just want you to be aware it requires for a two-thirds majority vote. Is there discussion? Yes?
We just have
Mr. Ahern, not Mr. Sparrow.
Right, thank you very much. Travis Ahern. We're just going to give a brief presentation from the engineers here, if people would be amenable. The presentation is available online, and then if there's further questions, obviously the gentleman from Weston and Sampson can get further into it, but really just a couple images that are available online. Chris Mayo, if you don't mind pulling that up, thank you very much. And David Steves is going to come down and go through that very briefly. There's this online. There's I know people pass some boards outside as well for anybody interested, but really just to give a sort of summary of where we are at the moment. If you'd like to step right there. Thank you. Just make sure you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Travis. I'm David Steves. I'm a project architect with Weston and Sampson Engineers. I'd just like to briefly go through, because I know it was on the website, the overview of what the project is about, and here to happy to answer any questions when I'm finished. How would I?
Slide control right here, so this button advances it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So here was, if I go back, okay. So here you can see on the upper left-hand corner the two existing sites where the current DPW operations are located. The upper side is 63 Arch Street, where the Highway Department is housed, and the lower photograph is 269 Central Street, where the Water Department is housed. They're on disparate sites and with large travel distances between those two sites. On the right-hand side, you can see just a conceptual idea of what a consolidated facility would look like if it were to be housed in a single type of building and facility. So I'll just briefly run through some of the bullet points here, why a new facility is needed, what is proposed, and the benefits of a new facility, and then briefly just touch on the overall project costs. So why does the town need a new facility? Well, the existing facilities are more than 70 years old. They require constant maintenance of the roofs. They leak. They're undersized with no room for expansion and future growth. They don't really accommodate their current day-to-day operations. They're energy inefficient. There is little to no insulation on the walls. They were built back in the 1950s, so they're more than 70 years old. They don't meet current codes. They don't meet accessibility codes. They don't have adequate men's and women's toilet facilities and locker room facilities and employee support spaces that are required of new state-of-the-art facilities. Here you can see briefly just some existing photographs of some of the existing conditions. You can see in the upper left-hand corner the deteriorating condition of the exterior walls that have not been repaired and almost needs to be completely rebuilt to actually be repaired. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see an interior space where you have shop areas overlapping with employee break room and lunchroom spaces. So undersized, cramped, not workable spaces. The lower left-hand corner, those are their locker room facilities. They're not private. They're in the public, not enough room for clearance or accessibility, as we talked about. And you can see in the lower right-hand corner, a lot of the equipment, if not most of the equipment, is stored outside, which is a very high-value investment in their fleet that is just deteriorating outside in the elements. So why do you need a new facility? We just briefly touched on it. But the overall town population has increased 2.5 times over the past 70 or so years that when these facilities were built. They don't have the adequate operational support to have adequate response times, employee safety, we talked about accessibility, environmentally and energy inefficient are all reasons why a new facility is needed, along with the fact that they're located on remote sites and makes operations and responding to town emergencies very inefficient. So what is proposed? We're proposing a consolidated facility at the former Axton Cross Chemical Company. That's a chemical packaging plant that is facility that has since been demolished, but there's a remnant slab on this site. So that's been abandoned. This site has been EPA reported over 50 years ago. So there are certain challenges with this site that we're aware of. One is the contamination that was caused by the previous use and the historic use of the site. It's adjacent to the Chicken Brook wetland, so there's a riverfront resource area that we need to be sensitive to for the construction of a new facility. And what are the benefits? Well, it would be a consolidated, centrally located facility for the DPW operations. It's also an opportunity to remediate some of the previous historical uses and the contamination that was caused there. We're going to look for federal and state grant funding to help mitigate some of the costs associated, potential costs associated with that remediation. And also there's an existing building on site that can be used as an EMS fire substation for quicker response times to town emergencies. So here are some photographs of the existing site. You can see in the upper left-hand corner is a photo of the Chicken Brook. And just to the right of that, you can see the existing structure that would be renovated and repurposed to house the EMS and emergency response substation. You can see in the middle photographs some of the remnant foundation system and slab that is left on site. You can see the former Axton Cross building in the upper right-hand corner that has since been demolished in the 1990s. It is right adjacent also to the rail trail that cuts through town, which is a very nice town amenity. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see an historic site plan of the remnant slab and the adjacent Chicken Brook location. So what is proposed? We're proposing approximately about a 45,000 square foot facility, which about doubles the size of their existing facilities that are grossly inadequate and undersized. It provides for office spaces and employee support spaces, workshops, a wash bay for town-wide vehicles, town-wide vehicle fueling, as well as adequate storage, as you can see in the large volume to the site rendering at the top, that houses the majority of the equipment and vehicles indoor to extend the service life of all that expensive equipment. Here's a conceptual rendering of one idea of a proposed facility. And this is just a graph that shows, based on the number of staffing, the number of vehicles, the number of departments, that a 45,000 square foot facility is commensurate with communities of the same size and same tasks of the existing DPW here in Holliston. And so what are the benefits? Employee safety, there's a certain ownership that employees will feel for the space, look forward to coming to work every day, improved morale, protect that high-valued equipment, the response times, an increased number of parking for the rail trail, and the addition of a centrally located fire and emergency EMS substation, and an opportunity to clean and remediate the site. Along with that, there's the decommissioning of the 2 existing sites that are town-owned and then would be developed in some way for some private or private-public development. Here's some examples of what a new facility would offer, from employee amenities and spaces, from kitchen and muster room and training areas, to the maintenance areas to have equipment that can maintain town fleet and vehicles to a certain standard. You can see in the lower left-hand corner, efficient center drive aisle vehicle storage spaces, so the town will be able to respond to the daily work activity efficiently and quickly in storing all that valuable equipment. New town-wide facility fueling, and a very energy-efficient building and site code-compliant facility. Some other benefits would be some ground source energy efficient, or ground source or air source heat pumps, rainwater harvesting, natural daylighting. Electric vehicle will be planned for, as well as a solar-ready roof construction for a solar array roof assembly. And just quickly to touch on the costs briefly, we're anticipating, and this article asks for $30 million, and what we're anticipating for the costs are about $667 per square foot. For the 45,000 square foot facility, that would cover the construction cost. As you can see in this graph, you can see the spike, and this data is from projects that we have worked on and have this historical data, as well as it's been updated with recently bid projects that have gone out to bid, and we've worked with contractors to develop this costing information. But you can see during the pandemic, in that red zone, the spike in construction costs because of supply chain issues, the availability of construction materials and staffing was all greatly impacted, which caused this great spike. But now we're seeing what we had anticipated, a lessening of the costs, are still challenged a little bit as we continue on to construct new projects. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Speaker.
Great, and I would just point out, thank you very much, David, and Weston and Sampson are here. If there's any specific questions about the project, I would just point people to page 47. I think both Ben and Ken referred to a working group that dealt with the finances of this project, and Article 22, which we'll speak on in a moment, that was developed with a working group of school committee, finance committee, and select board members to work out the financing to try to mitigate the impact to taxpayers. So thank you to everybody who participated in that, and I would draw your attention to that, and if there's any further questions, we're happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I'll get you next, Walt. Thank you.
Good evening, Devin Howe, 10 Dixon Circle.
What's your name, sir?
Devin Howe.
Thank you.
This question's probably directed towards Weston and Sampson. Concerned about the contamination on site. Just curious what testing's been done, if any testing's been done by the town, or if it's all record information.
To this point, the evaluation is ongoing. We've done a Phase 1 environmental assessment, which is really looking at the historical data at the site. There is some more investigative testing, some soil borings that are planned and anticipated in a Phase 2 assessment that is still to be completed. So that work is ongoing, and we're getting information and looking to fill the data gaps from what we found from the historical documentation moving forward.
Sure.
So my follow-up question would be, when is the Phase 2 going to be completed? And, is there any fallback position if, let's say, worse contamination was found on site that us as residents would want to know before we actually were to take over the land, acquire the land, and ultimately be responsible for any further contamination that could be found on site?
I can answer a couple of that. So this, first of all, it's the EPA and the DEP are aware of this and working with us to clean it up. Second of all, to also point out that the land hasn't been taken officially yet, so we can't complete all the testing until that takes place. That's really one of the holdups for Phase 2. And this article isn't there will be additional articles for town meeting to consider. This is just basically to start to get the process going and to work on the borrowing aspect of it, so that way we can move forward when the time comes and the land has been able to be taken.
Okay, no, go ahead, sir. There hasn't been a lot of discussion tonight, so go right ahead.
So I guess my last follow-up question would be, is there still an opportunity if the town were to engage with, starting to allocate those funds to pull back if, catastrophic contaminants were found?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, sure.
So I would just point out that the way that this was developed as well is to say that town meeting is approving us to move forward for 20 Cross Street. If 20 Cross Street cannot move forward, this will have to come back to town meeting. Where Weston and Sampson is right now, I'm not sure if you've been at the previous town meeting, so there was an original feasibility study that's available online. In October, we asked for a partial funding for design engineering, which is the phase that you just witnessed. And so really what we're looking to do, the select board said that they would come back to town meeting with a site. As of right now, we'd be looking to move forward with 20 Cross Street when we have access, when Land Court does its thing. We have access to the site. We work with EPA and DEP who've been on this site for 10 years or plus now. And so we have a certain amount of information, but we would love to, for it to come out of Land Court so we can finish that process. If at some point the town felt like 20 Cross Street is not doable, we couldn't go forward, we'd have to be coming back to town meeting to talk about other sites in the future, and then the town will be working with EPA and DEP for 20 Cross Street, because obviously it's in everybody's best interest that that site be used for something in the future, whether it's a DPW facility or not. So I think there's lots of opportunities to come back. Right now, the hope is through a partnership with EPA and DEP, one, that the cost of cleaning it up would not necessarily be borne by the town. That would be ideal. And there's a number of programs that the EPA has, the Brownfield program for one, where we would look to partner with them to cover the costs and some of that work. And that we could then put that back to good use, the 20 Cross Street site, for the town's interest. If we felt like that was not doable, we would come back. We would still try to work with EPA to make sure that the site could be used for another purpose in the future, just not necessarily the town's purposes. And then we would have to look at and discuss with town meeting the other site options. The other site options that were discussed, Weston and Sampson looked at whether or not we could tear down and rebuild on the existing sites that David mentioned originally. Looked at a site behind Pinecrest Golf Course. It's a Prentice Street address. And there was a couple other sites that we looked at as well that came out of an RFP from private sites that would be sold to the town. Ultimately, the select board chose to move forward at this time with 20 Cross Street. And if we hit a roadblock, we'll come back to town meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Before I call on Mr. McClellan to give you his other question, just for purposes of clarification of the record, I had not included the gentleman from Weston and Sampson as a non-resident being permitted to speak at town meeting on the original list of people we're authorizing, because I hadn't anticipated that. So could I have a motion to allow the gentleman, David, what's the last name?
David Steves,
to address town meeting? So moved. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? say aye. Thank you. No disrespect, miss. We just have a protocol here. I should have required a vote before we let you speak to us, and I missed it. Thank you. Further discussion. Mr. McLennan, did you want to be heard? No, all set? Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Hi. I had kind of been
Excuse me,
looking-
tell us your name and
My
address.
name's Melinda Blood. I live at 492 Washington Street. I had been looking at different sites for the past 6 months for a completely, totally different reason, and I found 5 serious sites here in Holliston. And the one at Cross Street, when I did the research, it even has the pictures. It shows plume that comes up and goes into the atmosphere. So there was another site that's right along Prentice Street, and to clean that up, I think it was $30 million in order to try to put houses on there or different things. And I was just wondering if this site had that plume and the other site was $30 million to clean up, what if we had to ask everybody for another $30 million to clean it up before we build a $30 million site? That's just my question.
We would not do that. I think that the intention here is if the Cross Street site is, we either don't get partnership from DEP or EPA that's sufficient to clean up a site. If it was that level of cleanup that was necessary, then we would not move forward with that site. We'd find other means because that cost is prohibitive. That's not feasible. So once the land comes out of, so she asked, how do we find that out before? So what we would do is once the land comes out of land court, the town would take it, and then we would do the testing, the phase 2 testing that Mr. Steves had spoke about. So once that testing starts taking place, we'd be able to determine what's there, what needs to be done, and then we would work with DEP and the EPA to figure out a cleanup program and what needs to be done to clean it up, and we would have a better understanding of it. So until we take the land, we can't do it.
Ma'am, just use the microphone so the folks at home can hear the exchange, please. Thank you.
The reason I ask is because I found a lot of people my age, some that are younger, some that are older, from these sites. We at MS, I have a lot of people who've died from like brain cancer from these other sites. And when you take a site like this, the reason you couldn't do anything about the one at Prentice Street was because it would affect the water. Cross Street's right on the water too, and I'm afraid of those chemicals going into the water. I mean, we already have a lot of problems like that. Just wondering.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Do you want to be heard, ma'am? Oh, Tina, go right ahead.
You guys hear me okay? How's that? I would just like to reiterate the concern about the safety of the site. You know, as I sit on the board, it will be a #1 priority. You saw it on the list of why we would move forward with a new DPW site, is to ensure the safety of our employees. So there's a very high threshold to pass there, and we have the consultants doing the work, and we will be asking those questions. We have been asking those questions. There's simply no way we're moving forward with a site where we have known chemicals that would cause any risk to the use that would be on that site, and we will have that information in our hands before we move forward on any site, be it Cross Street or elsewhere. So I really want to just understand or let you know that I understand your concern. I hear your concern. I share your concern, and we will be doing all the due diligence as spoken about previously tonight to make sure that employee safety is #1.
Thank you. Ma'am, do you want to be heard?
I do.
Yeah, sure, go right ahead. Just tell us your name and address, please.
Got it. Barbara Ryan, 14 Irving Place. Good evening.
Good evening.
One question is, if this goes forward and approved next week, what happens with the current site and how do you decommission that, and the thoughts around that? Same concerns environmentally and impact to water. And second, for comment and wanting to understand, have we ever thought about combining a fire department, DPW, and such into one building, vice knowing that there's likely a need down the road for a fire station, and some surrounding towns have done a beautiful job of combining both. Thank you.
Go ahead, just Travis, please. Thank you.
So I'll ask Mr. Steves if he wants to get into a little bit more on the decommissioning process, but for anybody who was here in October when we were talking about the partial design engineering, it was very clear, and it was put in the bid documents and documentation for Weston and Sampson in the second phase, once we got through feasibility, that decommissioning of Arch and Central Street both are in, very advantageous areas in town for either a future public or private use, and that, one, making sure that those sites are ready for any potential future use is a major component for the town moving forward. That's in all of our best interests, and so that is included in the scope that Weston and Sampson is working on. And so I think David can get into that a little bit more, and I'm forgetting the second part of the question. Oh, the fire department, right. So in this particular plan, if I understood the question, you're probably speaking more about replacing the central fire station on Central Street, and so that is not included in this plan. However, as Mr. Steves mentioned, and I think we can elaborate more if needed, there is a site, and this came up in the MRI study that Mr. Sparrow alluded to in the beginning, that said, we lease a space in Pope Industrial Park for a satellite location for the fire department, and that the 20 Cross Street location is an excellent way to phase out that lease and have a better site owned by the town and have more of a municipal facility, which I think you see in a lot of areas and would be an excellent outcome for the town if we're able to do that. Now, it might be for fire equipment, it might be for ambulance equipment. It's an advantageous location for both. And I think ambulance is probably more the focus at this time, but we are in the preliminary stages of that. So I think to answer the question, if I understood it, it's less at the moment to replace central fire, but it is, we are hoping to roll in a long-term solution from the MRI study for our fire EMS. And David, if you don't mind just adding anything else about the decommissioning process for the other two sites.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Travis. On the decommissioning, as we touched on, the existing buildings are aged, and we would do a hazardous building materials assessment of all the existing structures on site, anticipating that they're going to be demolished and removed and disposed of appropriately. There's also a phase 2 environmental assessment that would need to undergo the same due diligence as the proposed site. We'll be taking soil sampling and do the analysis and testing of the soil conditions there as well. We know that that's housed the existing, historically, the existing town fueling facility, so we know that there are underground storage tanks. So these are the things that we're going to be looking at when we do that deeper dive into the decommissioning and what's involved with that.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Matt Leach from 10 Mill Street. My question relates to the funding for the new DPW facility. I see that the $17.25 million will be borrowed, non-excluded. My understanding of that, and I encourage people who are more knowledgeable than I to correct me on this, is that that debt will be serviced out of our operating budget. That's obviously a large sum of money to service. And I'd like to hear about the plans to create the space in our budget to be able to accommodate that debt as we move forward.
Ken?
Ken Chada, 676 Fisk. Earlier, I think we've already passed it. I lose track of the articles we pass here, but the $2.35 million that we put aside every year for the capital appropriation, we've been trying to build that up over a number of years, many years, as a matter of fact, and we're going to still try to build that up. But that $2.35 million goes into our capital expenditure fund, from which we can do two things. We can either appropriate money directly to pay for capital items like fire trucks and things, or we can use that to fund capital debt. So when we talk about money being paid for from within the operating budget, it's not really the operating budget, it's within the general fund. part of that $2.35 million that we just appropriated will go towards debt service for this project should it pass. So the money's already been appropriated by the town, and next year you'll see a similar appropriation going forward.
Thank you. Sure. Use the microphone, please. Thank you.
On my way.
Yeah, great.
Final question, is there, an estimate on what the total cost would be to borrow the $17.25 million? So what would the overall cost of the town be, both for the initial, what we're borrowing, and then the cost of capital?
I have my soon-to-be ex-vice chair looking it up for you, but it's in what you have. If you look at the back in the reports, there's the working group that was referred to earlier. I wasn't on that, but members of the FinCom were. They worked out a financing plan that's in your warrant document. If you look towards the back, it has both this article and the next one.
Page 47.
What is it, 47? Okay, yeah, page 47. Then that describes that has all the borrowing costs and everything on it in there.
Okay.
So now they're telling me they didn't put the total cost, including interest. Okay, so that makes that kind of moot. Let me see. Well, no, they have the total debt service amount here, so you could, we could get certainly something recreated. I'd have to look at this in greater detail, but this plan basically lays out the payment plan, so you have to separate out the pieces, but it's all in there. So, as I said, I can't do it. I don't want to do it in real time, but.
Yeah, my concern is I want to make sure everyone understands the amount we're talking about. I'm not sure everyone understands.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the bottom line is you're talking about 20-year borrowings, and at today's rates, now granted, today's rates are a little higher, but municipalities pay a little lower because it's tax-exempt rates and things like that, and we are fortunate to have the AAA rating. So it's not a hard calculation to guesstimate how much you're going to pay, but yes, you're going to pay appreciably more in interest than you would have a year ago. As I said, I don't want to speculate. I'd have to go do the math and tell you what the total cost would come out with the interest payments. So, okay. Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid question, and so that's that's really Travis can take care of that, but Travis can make sure that's published before next Tuesday.
Absolutely. So if you're looking at page 47, which I mentioned before, to the gentleman's point, the borrowing principle is summarized at the bottom. The borrowing interest can be summarized as well. We'll add that and update it for the group. I think the summary that you see on the right hand is generally how we focus on this, and so I think the gentleman catches a very good oversight that the borrowing principle and borrowing interest should be summarized on the bottom there. If you look to the right, what we're looking at is for an average current single-family value in the town of Holliston, which is now up to $600,000. We've tried to calculate that out to the net tax impact for that single-family home. We've done that for Article 21 and 22 combined, and so we can also break that out specifically for the DPW facility. To the tax impact, the calculation is based on anything that is the Prop 2.5 above the excluded debt, because anything that is underneath, to the point that Ken just made, would be balanced within the normal operating budget with the capacity that you all approved earlier, that in this fiscal year is going into the capital expenditure fund, but in a future year is our capacity to borrow within the levy without negatively impacting our other operating budgets. So we'll update this before next Tuesday's vote, but the column on the right is generally also what we hear the most from residents on wanting to see what is the impact to my tax bill estimated. So, and thank you very much to Chris Hamons for putting all this together, working with that working group of school committee, finance committee, select board members. This was referred to as the Goldilocks because it was just right in the middle of what a few different groups' priorities were, looking for the future. So this was a lot of work from your finance director, treasurer collector, and with those boards and committees. And we'll put together quite a bit of information and some one-pagers, because if you'll all recognize as well in the warrant, you can read the ballot question as you enter into the local election next Tuesday is a very general question, which it has to be by law, and so we'll have as much supplemental information there as possible, so not to overwhelm, but also to have everybody be informed, and happy to answer any other questions as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll move to a vote on the motion. The debate's gone on for a while, so I'll just refresh you with the motion. The motion is that the town appropriate the sum of $7 million from the capital expenditure fund and authorize the borrowing of an additional $23 million with 75% or $17.25 million to be non-excluded debt and 25% or $5.75 million to be excluded debt for the purpose stated in Article 21 of the warrant related to the property across street, with both the appropriation and borrowing authorization contingent upon successful passage of a corresponding ballot question at the May 23, 2023 election. This requires a 2/3 vote. We'll try a voice vote and see if it's unanimous, and if so, we'll proceed. If not, we'll have a hand count. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Do I hear nays? Nay. Okay. We'll have a call for a hand count then. All those in favor, we have tellers in each section?
Yep.
Counters, please. All those in favor, raise their cards, please. Who's got this section? Got somebody?
Yeah, I
No.
do.
This guy, this fellow here? Yeah, looks okay. Great.
Is that Dennis, was that you? Yes. Okay, got it. 30? $35? 1, 4. No, she's
13?
13?
Got them all? Yeah.
Yep.
All right, all those opposed, raise your hand, please.
I'm sorry, Dennis? What? Thank you. 3. Celeste, none? Kevin, 0?
And the vote is 137 in favor, 5 opposed, so that passed by more than 2/3. So voted. We'll move to Article 22, Water and Transportation Infrastructure Improvements, sponsored by the Select Board. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sum of money for the purpose of designing and constructing improvements to water mains, roadways, sidewalks, and drainage for Norfolk Street, Central Street, and Goulding Street, or take any action relative thereto. FinCom recommends appropriation of $2.6 million from the Water Infrastructure Fee Account for the Norfolk Street Water Mains Replacement Project, including design and engineering, and further recommends approval of the excluded borrowing authorization of $5.6 million, contingent upon a successful vote on the corresponding ballot question on the May 2023 election ballot. The vote was 4-2 and 1, with Mr. Alford and Whitaker opposed, Mr. Shader abstained. The motion is moved that the town appropriate the sum of $2.6 million from the Water Infrastructure Fee Account for the Norfolk Street water mains, including design and engineering, and further that the town authorize the borrowing of an additional $5.6 million in excluded debt, with only the borrowing authorization contingent upon successful passage of a corresponding ballot question at the May 23, 2023 election. Is there a second? Second. Discussion? Yes, Travis?
Chris, could you pull up those slides? Thank you very much. Just very quickly to give some context, and then happy to answer any questions. So This was again worked on by that same working group. It's why it's included on page 47 and in all of the financial forecasting that was done. Just really high level. 2 Stantec studies were done. They've been online since 2021. One of the major components of those, and something that we've actually been hearing quite a bit in the strategic planning process, is an emphasis on getting water mains replaced, our water infrastructure updated. That includes well number 5, the water treatment plant that Mr. Sparrow mentioned in his opening remarks. We've done 1 project, which I'll cover very briefly in a second. The next 3 priority projects for the water main replacement program would be Norfolk Street, Central Street, and Goulding Street, which if we were to do with our normal cash payment process that we've been undertaking for the last decade or so, would take about 10 years to do. So what we've worked on with our partners of the Finance Committee, Select Board, School Committee, is a program that would try to accelerate that from 10 years to 5 years. And so, again, part of this process is letting the water main prioritization lead the way for infrastructure, and then making sure we're looking at those very expensive projects holistically for the next generation, and then incorporating sidewalks as necessary through those. So if you just go to the next slide, Chris. This is a summary of an excerpt from the Stantec water main report that's online, excuse me. There's also a number of presentations that they provided the Select Board that are on there as well. But this is Appendix B, is the priority list, and it goes actually for 2 pages, about just under 20 projects. Priority 1 was the Fisk-Bullard Central Expansion and Loop, and what that provides is bidirectional flow of water from the new water treatment plant at well number 5. And that is to make sure that we are maximizing the benefit of that well number 5 treatment plant that you all invested a lot of money in and is now operational, making sure that we're spreading out the benefit of that to all residents. The next 3 projects are the ones that I just mentioned: Norfolk, Goulding, Central. You can see here that they have, Stantec has itemized each section of that water main for the age and the type of materials that were used when they were installed. You can just go to the next slide, Chris. So then what we've taken here is from the other Stantec report, 2 different engineering groups within the same firm, to look at corresponding pedestrian accessibility improvements. So for Norfolk, Central, and Goulding, each one of those also have a corresponding recommendation from Stantec in the gap analysis. I'm going to focus on Norfolk Street, but I'm happy to answer any questions on Central and Goulding as well. The Norfolk Street, if you're unfamiliar with the area, we have sidewalk that goes a good way up from the Central Street area, the downtown area as well, but then it stops, and then if you continue on Norfolk out of downtown, the sidewalks stop, but then there's parks just beyond that. So the idea here from Stantec reviewing all of our sidewalk network is to say, if we're going to do a water main project, it makes sense for us to then connect our existing sidewalk to parks along Norfolk Street. Central Street has come up quite a bit as it relates to economic development potential, the spine between Blair Square and the rail trail, and then our historic downtown. We have quite a few things going on there, including a feasibility study for wastewater as a sewer district downtown. That was discussed earlier. Goulding Street is a residential neighborhood, but also is houses our senior center. If you could just go to the next slide, Chris, just 2 more really briefly. We did, the Select Board hosted a bike and listen tour back in September of 22. These are a couple of the points that were made along the way, fixing the sidewalks. We've known about the issues with Norfolk Street. It includes drainage, which is why the cost is so significant for Norfolk specifically. There's a lot of drainage and roadway items outside of just sidewalks. And then the funding mechanism that I discussed earlier, or I'll discuss again at the end, but was discussed earlier, is talking about how we'll fund those separately between water and then borrowing. If you could go to the next slide, Chris. So these 2 show Central Street on the left and then Goulding Street on the right. And so Central Street, we have a lot of families that if they had access to those sidewalks could decide to send their kids to school walking rather than using the bus. They're within 2 miles, so they pay bus fees. But there's also obviously a lot of reasons that we want people to have access to that sidewalk network, and extending it is really what Stantec is recommending here while we're opening up the street doing water mains. And then the senior center on Goulding Street is, again, a number of residents that would enjoy access to the network, but also a major component being that senior center getting more access to it with ADA compliant sidewalks. And then the last slide I'll just come back to, this was already shown earlier in the evening. I just want people to understand the funding mechanism here. The section in blue is what will be on the ballot next week. Overall, there's $16.2 million here, but the funding mechanism that was discussed with the working group to mitigate the impact to taxpayers is to continue to have the water system pay for water, and then anything outside of what would be the normal water project. For example, extending the sidewalk on Norfolk Street to the parks would then be paid for by a borrowing authorization, and that's where you come to the $5.6 million. It should be noted here that because what you see in the article is only $2.6 million for Norfolk Street, that's what's in the water infrastructure fee account. So we have to have that fee account continue to regenerate and come back to future town meetings for additional support in the future. But what this allows us to do is assume the borrowing authorization, should town meeting support it tonight and the voters support it next Tuesday night, to allow us to continue to plan these projects and not have multiple ballot questions for these 3 projects. And I would point out that the reason behind that is to say that the select board is trying to take, what would take 10 years to do down to 5 years, because there is a long list, but to bring back to town meeting over and over, making sure that everybody understands the plan. We're trying to be as aggressive as possible, but we're also trying to mitigate impact to taxpayers. So this is the funding mechanism that was established by the working group. The ballot question would be for the amount in blue, and the question here tonight would also ask for $2.6 million for the water infrastructure fee, and you would most likely see multiple requests in the future as that account regenerates to allow us to continue to move through these projects. We would start, assuming support from town meeting and then the ballot, we would start on the Norfolk design almost immediately. We have quite a bit of information dating back to 2008 because it has been such a problematic area. But Central Street and Goulding Street may have a couple of checkpoints along the way. Central Street, for example, if we were going to do a sewer district, we were going to put in sewer pipes that will obviously impact the timing of those projects. And we don't have all that information yet, but we know that based on the age of the water pipes, we're going to need to dig up that street soon. So we're planning these 3 projects based on the prioritization of Stantec. Any questions I'd be happy to take. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chaz. Yes, sir. That's Tina's father, isn't it? Yeah. What's his name?
I don't remember his first name. We'll find out.
Ron Pipe, 47 Bittersweet Circle. Curious to know why the Finance Committee leadership chose not to support
We
this.
lose on what other streets, right? Mr. Shader, you abstained. You want to explain your abstention? You want to explain the other votes?
Okay, so I feel bad because I was betting Travis that no one would ask me about the abstention, so I lost. I will tell you, I have trepidation about this, not the work, okay? The water work needs to be done. As I pointed out in the presentation, the Finance Committee did vote to support this. And for me, one thing that I have said at prior town meetings is I'm not convinced that new sidewalks are the highest priority for the town. That doesn't mean I abstained because I was saying I will leave it up to the town to decide next Tuesday whether they choose to put their money towards this project. Unlike things like the DPW, where that project is an all or nothing approach, right? If the town votes no, project's dead, they have to go back to the drawing board. This is one where, as I said in the presentation I gave earlier, the project will continue on the water infrastructure side. We'll continue to replace the roadway when they do the water work. We'll continue to replace the curbing and the sidewalks that exist when they do the water work. That's how we've done every water infrastructure project so far. So I look at things like a potential new high school, things like that, and I say, I'm not convinced myself that the town feels this is priority, but I also don't know how the town feels. It's not like I go around and poll everybody in town. I just talk to the people that talk to me. So I abstained because at the time of the vote, I was the last vote and it had already passed, so my vote really didn't matter at that point. But I just said I'd rather abstain and then wait to see what next Tuesday brings. If the town says this is what we want, we'll move forward and we'll go forward. If the town says this is not what we want, then we'll discuss what happens afterwards. That's really why I abstained, because I did not feel that there was a strong enough sentiment in myself that this is necessarily where I wanted town fund to go. But I also want to be clear, I'm not arguing against it. I didn't vote no because I really truly felt that I didn't know what the temperature of the town was on this issue, and I wanted to let the town decide at the ballot box.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Alfred?
Did you want my explanation as well? Okay. So I was, in full disclosure, part of the working group. We negotiated in good faith. I think we all came to a good agreement. But when it came down to whether we did all 3 projects at once or one at a time, that part was kind of left to the select board to make a request and for us to make our recommendation. So at our finance committee meeting, when we were debating this, I made a motion to support the Norfolk Street project and do one at a time. I wasn't convinced that we were going to need to actually bond out the other 2 projects for because I thought we may have an opportunity to either pay it with free cash or to or that the Central Street project, for instance, may change as we look at the wastewater treatment plant. So I wanted to do one at a time. So I made a motion to do one. There wasn't a second, so no one else on the board supported that. When it came to then the vote to do all 3 at once, I voted against it because, again, I wanted to do one project at a time.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Okay, seeing not, we'll proceed to a vote again. This requires, oh, I'm sorry. Got to look all the way right, huh? Just tell us who
All
you
the way
are.
over. I was on oh, that's really loud.
It's okay.
I was on the yes vote side of that.
I'm sorry, tell the folks who you are.
Oh, I wasn't sure if I had to do that over
Yes,
there.
please.
Julie Winston, 45 Country Road.
Thank you.
I was on the yes side of that vote, mainly because the working group did put a lot of effort into a great collaboration on what they felt was something that the town would want, you know, having a walkability, and if the towns are going to be, if the roads are going to be ripped up anyway, why not improve the road and put in the sidewalk, which made a lot of sense to me. So with that and talking with the people from that committee, or not, it's not a committee, sub-working group, I voted for it and was surprised that Dan didn't, but had a reason why he didn't, and we had it went anyway. So I wanted to add that flavor to the vote.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, sir.
Jay Robinson, 233 Chamberlain Street. So myself and Michelle were also on the working group. And just to back up Dan, which you won't always hear, he and I were both in support. We don't always see eye to eye. We just had, I think, a philosophical difference that my attitude was bundle the work, let the choose it, do the project as what I'd call a sprint. And so I think I heard Dan support, I don't know who it was, asked why I didn't vote in favor of sidewalks. The working group was not an open meeting group, so you wouldn't be able to hear him say it directly, but I did that he was in support of the sidewalks, but we're the finance committee, right? We're not the policy committee. And I think we had a philosophical difference on, as Mr. Cronin said, singing for the supper. So I think I was more like, give them the batch of money, and frankly, this is their test, because they want to spend $9 million on new sidewalks, and this is the first sprint. So I was like, we voted these individuals into office. They're all professionals, and we need to give them the money they asked for, as long as you support the project. So Dan was highly supportive of the sidewalks. He just didn't agree with the funding approach and we never took a formal vote. Hope that clarifies.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, seeing none, okay. Oh, leaving, okay, Liz. I want to make sure I didn't overlook you, Liz. We'll move to a vote. The motion is, again, to refresh our memory, move that the town appropriate the sum of $2.6 million from the water infrastructure fee account for the Norfolk Street water mains, including design and engineering, and further that the town authorize the borrowing of an additional $5.6 million and exclude a debt with only the borrowing authorization contingent upon successful passage of a corresponding ballot question at the May 23, 2023 election. Again, it requires a 2/3 majority. We'll see if it's unanimous. So all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Okay, proceed to a hand count. All those in favor of the motion, raise their hands, please. Yeah.
27. 24. 23. Thank you.
Okay, all those opposed, please.
Two?
Yeah.
9. 4. 2. Thank you.
What is it? That vote is 110 in favor, 20 opposed, so that carries. Article 23, golf course improvements. To see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds a sum of money for the purpose of making improvements to the cart paths and drainage and for mitigation of invasive species at Pinecrest Golf Course for holes 2 through 8, or take any action relative thereto. The FinCom recommended appropriation of $200,000 from the Pinecrest revolving fund for the purposes stated in the article. The motion is move to appropriate the sum of $200,000 from the Pinecrest revolving fund for the purposes stated in Article 23 in the warrant. Is there a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Report of the Community Preservation Committee. To see if the town will vote to act on the report of the Community Preservation Committee for the fiscal 2023 Community Preservation Budget, and to appropriate a reserve for later appropriation monies from the Community Preservation Fund annual revenues or available funds for the administrative expenses of the Community Preservation Committee, the payment of debt service, the undertaking of community preservation projects, and for other necessary and proper expenses for the year. The reserves are Community Housing Reserve from Community Housing Reserve 72,016, Open Space Reserve 72,016, Historic Resources Reserve 72,016. Appropriations, administrative functions to support the committee 5,000, cemetery preservation, Hopping Brook Cemetery 25,000, community farm improvements, a sunset extension 10,000, total of $40,000. See Article 25 for separate request. The FinCom recommends the town appropriate $30,000 from the Community Preservation Fund general balance and to extend the sunset provision on community farm improvements to June 30th, 2024. That was unanimous 7-0 vote. The motion is move to appropriate the sum of $30,000 from the Community Preservation Fund general, strike that, Community Preservation Fund general balance, and to extend the sunset provision on the community farm improvements to June 30th, 2024, as specified in Article 24 of the warrant. Is there a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Article 25, Goodwill Park Project, Community Preservation Committee funding. To see if the town will vote to appropriate a reserve for later appropriation monies from Community Preservation Fund annual revenues or available funds for improvement to Goodwill Park or to take any action relative thereto. The FinCom recommends appropriation of $1,100,000 from the Community Preservation Fund for the purpose stated in the article. The motion is move to appropriate the sum of $1,100,000 from the Community Preservation Fund for the purpose stated in Article 25 of the warrant. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Yes, sir. Okay.
Chris, would you pull up my slides?
Oh. And they'd work all year hard. Give them a few minutes.
Hi, I just want to give a little backup on the history of this and sort of where this is coming from. Last year, we were given an allocation from the state for $100,000 to look into some improvements at Goodwill Park. We got enough money to take a little bit more of a holistic approach to that, to look at the park in general. The initial ask was just for to look at bathrooms, improving some of those bathrooms over there, which if any of you has used in the last 10, 15 years, you'll know that they're not accessible or functional most of the time, or really anything that we would need to make them serviceable for what we need as a town. If you can go to the next slide, Chris. So once we got that allocation, we started working with our engineering firm. We presented the initial concept to the CPC in August, actually, of this past summer. And we've been going through the process with them. We had a couple of lengthy public hearings to discuss our initial design. After those, we sort of had to go back to the drawing board and redesign the concept based on the feedback that we had gotten. And we came to the table with a design in January that all of the stakeholders could get on board with. That would include accessible bathrooms, an addition on the old historic town building. So if you guys look at page 48 in your packet, it has the just sort of the renderings of what these are looking like. It would include an addition on the old historic stone building there that would allow us for some additional camp space to operate. That's one of the benefits of this project that we don't see with a lot of these types of projects. That would actually help increase the revenue that we bring in as a department by increasing the volume of camp that we can take. Really, since COVID, we have not been able to meet the demand for camp at Goodwill. The indoor space that we have for inclement weather right now is that small garage space that you've seen over there. This building on the top of the images that you're seeing would be that sort of inclusive indoor camp space that we really need to make that space more operable for us and to let more kids into camp. Would also bring in more revenue for the department. In addition to that, the space that we have there now, so this building that you see on the top is in the footprint of the existing pavilion and garage space that we have now. The space would be more usable in so many different ways, like, it would allow us to bring those campers in. It would also allow for rentable space out of season for different types of events that people would want to have at Goodwill. We'd be moving the stage to a more centrally located place. If people have been at the concerts there, which are pretty well attended, you'll know that the space that we have the pavilion in where the bands play now is really centered toward the Green Street side. It's kind of cornered in the park, and now we'd be moving it more central to the middle of the park, opening it up a little bit more. On the back of that structure, the pavilion, which is in the bottom right image of what you have in your books, there would be seating that you could see the tennis courts from. That would allow, that's our varsity tennis facility here in town, so it would just be nice seating for everyone to be able to, spectators to come see those matches. Lunch space for camp, just more usable space for us. Would also put new bathrooms in. The bathroom space would be across the sort of walkway up to the garage, where the garage currently is, adjacent to where the tennis courts are. That would be a prefab bathroom unit with 2 toilets in the men's room and the women's room, a little mechanical room that we would have on a time lock system to prevent vandalism and things like that. A couple of things I want to mention about the allocation. We feel like we really went through a pretty vigorous process in terms of getting this project exactly where the town is going to get the best value for what we're looking for here. The allocation from CPC is contingent upon the bid coming back within that allocation. So basically, if we end up putting this out to bid, which would, if this is approved, would be in the next month, I would say, or so, and we find that the costs are much more than we had anticipated for this, we would come back to the drawing board, redesign or reconfigure the funding structure that we're looking for, and come back to town meeting in October with an adjusted ask for CPC. So I'm going to stop there for now because I'm trying to move this along, and if people have more questions, I have more information if people are looking for it, but that's where I'll go for now.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Frank. Further discussion? Yes, sir? Come on, yes, come on down, Jim, please.
James Arena DeRosa, 9 Mechanic Street. Can you just explain what you meant about the pavilion would be central to the field? Like, do you have a map or what it would look like in center field? Will it interfere with baseball, with soccer? No, I just think it'd be good to know that.
Yeah, no, totally. Okay, so the structures highlighted in green, except for the 2 dugouts, which are not part of this initial phase 1, are what we're looking at. Right next to where the tennis courts are, please ignore the court structure. The reason this is phase 1 of the plan is because when we initially looked at this, we took a really big picture of the whole park, and we had included some drastic changes to the courts. When we dug into those a little more with soil testing, some of those things were cost prohibitive. So what we're just talking about here is the structures, which are here in green. If you look at the largest structure there, that's where the stage is, right where the tennis courts are. And if you see the back of those, that's where the seating is to look at to be able to watch those matches. So, and at the top of the tennis courts, that's where the bathroom is. And then the new structure was just the addition on the old stone structure. That's in the footprint of where the pavilion currently is.
Great, thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, this requires a majority vote, and the motion is to appropriate the sum of $1,100,000 from the Community Preservation Fund for the purpose stated in the article. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Interim report of the Envisioning Future Holliston Committee. To hear a report from the Comprehensive Long-Range Plan Committee, also known as the Envisioning Future Holliston, pursuant to the charge established at the May 2021 annual town meeting and take any action relative thereto. The motion is moved that an interim update on the town-wide strategic plan development be heard. Is there a second? Mr. Ahern?
Very briefly. Okay. So, the Envisioning Future Holliston is a committee in Holliston. You can view them and contact them through their website, their landing page on our website. If you look at this, contribute to the strategic plan here, you will, well, let me actually talk about Envisioning Future Holliston first. Could you go to the next slide, Chris? So this is the group, and so it represents 7 different areas within town, sort of a rolled up version of the first iteration of Envisioning Future Holliston, which had, I believe, 17 members from different boards and committees. We tried to roll those into general functions within town. We have Health and Human Services, and so representing that, you have Peter Egan from the COA, Dee Fair from Youth and Family Services. For general services, general government services, you have Ben Sparrow and Pat Boyd. Public education, you have Stacy Raffi from the school committee, and we also have a number of school ambassadors who've been added to this process, which is an excellent addition to the process from previous, and they have been also some efforts to have the high school students engaged in the process I'll talk about in a moment. We have 2 different lenses in which we're viewing all of this work that sort of overarches all of these different categories, including sustainability, Rich Rosenberry from Sustainable Waste Committee, and diversity, equity, inclusion. We have Annie Singh and Marlene Fine. Economic development, we have 2 representatives from the EDC, Glenn Brown and Victoria Anshu. And then land use, we have our planning board member who's the chair of Envisioning Future Holliston, Barbara Peaty, and our alternate member is Jack LeWinter. If you go to the next slide, Chris. And so again, at any given point, you can reach out to that entire group by emailing Envisioning Future Holliston at holliston.k12.ma.us, which is available on the website. So the thing I really want to highlight tonight is that this is very much an interim update because October is going to be the really big, let's talk about a 5 to 10 year strategic plan, town-wide strategic plan for the town. But as of right now, what I want to highlight for all of you, and I want you to take back to your neighbors and your friends, is that we are very much in the community engagement stage. We just went through 3 community forums located at different locations in town at different times of day to try to make it as accessible as possible to everybody. But Barry Dunn, who is the consultant that was engaged by Envisioning Future Holliston, has also been doing focus groups, some of which are with nonprofits or religious groups outside of Holliston, to sort of say what are the things that we don't have as amenities within the town, make sure that we're getting the broadest possible input. But right now, you still have the ability, even though we're through the community forum stage, to engage with Social Pinpoint, which is a website. On that first page that I showed, there's a link. We have QR codes out in the hallway on Facebook. We're trying to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to engage. You can just simply leave a comment. You can take a survey. If you'd like to print out a survey because you'd rather do it not online, we have that option. We have those surveys also available at Town Hall. So we are still in the community engagement phase, and we have about just under a month left. Next slide, Chris. This is just to show sort of how we've been able to get people into the Social Pinpoint site. We've seen some spikes in activity, which is excellent, but we still have just under a month left. So please make sure, if you've not already, or if you went to a community forum, you've had thoughts percolating, and you really got to get your thoughts out there, you still have the opportunity. Go to Social Pinpoint, either take the survey, leave comments. There's opportunities for you to comment on other people's comments, engage in the process. Final slide, Chris. Thank you very much. And then just so everybody understands the process here and where we come back in October. So the project initiation and planning, Envisioning Future Holliston, 3 members of that group and myself, reviewed 3 companies that put their name forward to lead this process on behalf of the town. Barry Dunn was selected. The stakeholder engagement phase, we are currently in. The soft deadline on that is June 12th, which is why I say you have just under a month to continue to engage with Social Pinpoint. Once we get through that phase, the consultant is going to sit down with the Envisioning Future Holliston Committee, you saw the members earlier, and work on what did we take away from the community forums, from Social Pinpoint, and then they're going to number crunch over the summer and come back. The cost-benefit analysis and plan finalization taking place before, but then probably coming to the community between Labor Day and the October town meeting is going to be a major phase to say, here are all the things that we know that the community wants. How do we prioritize them? Because obviously, as we've discussed this evening, financing is always an issue that we have to discuss and we have to work on together and collaboratively. And so this is where we are in the process. There is a month left to get your thoughts and opinions into this process before that number crunching begins. And so I appreciate everybody who has engaged so far, and I very much would thank everybody for taking the time and continuing to put your thoughts into that, because that is going to make this a much better output from the consultant at the end of this process. And then going into October, what you'll see is the 5-year strategic plan. There's probably going to be quite a few action items. There's probably going to be costs to some of those, discussions on some of the policy items that come out of that, and that's where town meeting will come in. A number of things will most likely be done through select board meetings, but really, as you know, as active participants in town government, by coming to town meeting, the majority of items that we do that change the future of Holliston will be done in this room in the future, but between October and May. So again, get your thoughts in now, and we'll be back in October to discuss at length. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Robert Principe, 203 Turner Road. My pronouns are he, his, him. I'm actually here speaking on the behalf of listen to me, I'm going to speak on behalf of Vision Future Holliston. Diverse Holliston, which is a group that I know some of you are familiar with. I'll say a little bit about it. There were supposed to be other members of Diverse Holliston with me this evening, but as you know, with schedule changing and so forth, so you just envision hordes of people behind me, because we're all certainly interested in the future of this town. And to speak specifically, we wanted to speak specifically to the work of Envisioning Future Holliston as it continues. And I want to echo what's been Travis said in terms of we need more engagement in this phase, the stakeholder phase of engagement, to get as many voices as possible to speak to thoughts for the future of the town. So please, you said that's open until when? June 12th. So there's still plenty of time to spread the word amongst constituents and diverse constituents in the town to get input into that piece. Just to get a teeny bit about Diverse Holliston, if you don't know, we've done a lot of things in town, including support this project, Envisioning Future Holliston. We've been engaged with that since I think survey number 2, when Ben reached out to us to talk about the construction of the survey that was part of Envisioning Future Holliston. And also, we've done community events. We just recently partnered with Holliston PTO Mindshare, Holliston Special Education Parent Advisory Council, CPAC, Holliston Youth and Family Services, and Holliston Public Schools to host a community dialogue on March 7th, which was entitled How to Have Important Conversations with Our Children for Greater Inclusion in Holliston. It was excellent. We had 20, 25 people. We had a bunch of people online. And I can report one piece, just because I think it's important. All the participants, although there was some discomfort that they expressed in speaking openly about issues of race and gender and sexual orientation, et cetera, they were happy to have the opportunity to practice together. So the discomfort was a good component of that growth and development. And so it was a success in that sense, that particular event. Looking to this project, Envisioning Future Holliston, that we move from this stakeholder engagement phase of the project to the strategic planning development, as Travis pointed out, phase. We wanted to address the work of town leadership as they move to discuss and deliberate the results of the gathering of the information that comes from this stakeholder engagement part to define for the future priorities and goals for Holliston. Those people that are involved currently with the committee now, Envisioning Future Holliston, and the town leadership as a whole will need training and ongoing coaching to develop the skills necessary to effectively analyze the data obtained and define strategies that are specifically focused on creating the change for greater access, diversity, equity, and inclusion that Holliston needs. That doesn't happen because people want it. It can't be just intention. There's a skill set involved with that. More broadly speaking, all town leaders will need training to develop the skills needed to move beyond just an awareness of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, to an ability to readily see gaps in practices and policies. And let me give you a couple of examples, because I've been doing this work for a bunch of years. Sitting in a focus group of white men in a major tech firm and having a conversation, because the company knows the importance of advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the organization. So speaking of the idea of developing a pipeline for diverse leadership, these are all middle managers, white men. Why white men? Because myself as a white, cisgender, heterosexual male, I work with the focus group of white men. So, ask the question, well, what are you going to get? Where are you going to develop this pipeline of diverse leadership for the organization? Raise a hand. Listen, my manager, these all middle managers, has a 15-year network that he has developed, another white male, that he's been, he's going to tap into to go for this. And my simple question to him was, and if you were going to describe somewhat accurately the demographic breakdown of that network that he's developed 15 years, how would you describe it? There was a pause, and he said, a bunch of white guys. So the potential for the change and the addition and growth of leadership that would be more diverse by gender, by race, et cetera, was pretty limited. But the point is that the gap in the thinking, sitting in a group literally focused on this, saying, we're going to do this, but then realizing, oh, wait a second, we don't have that pipeline. Or a department head in an educational institution, same issue, 2 openings, sort resumes, show me the resumes you're going to use moving forward to continue the search. When you're ready. Okay, ready, good, let's look. Go through the pile, resume after resume, duplicate credentials, almost identical to the department head, and that individual finally had to admit, I don't really know how to do this well. Another white male. I'm not picking on white men, you can see I'm one of them. But I'm just saying the issue of being able to see gaps in practices and policies is not innate. It's not even innate in leaders that have developed leadership over years, especially in predominantly white environments like Holliston. So we need to recognize that the training is necessary, given all this great data we're going to come up with from Envisioning Future Holliston. But the Vision Future Holliston Committee and town leadership needs the appropriate training to upscale their skill set related to be able to go where we need to go. So that being said, Holliston must recognize the resources needed to be allocated in order to provide this training and coaching. We want to emphasize the town's need to define specific strategies that will make Holliston more welcoming and accessible to people who, for example, are non-white, of different sexualities and genders, of different faith bases and religions, different neurological types, and different socioeconomic status, amongst other elements of differences among us, right? So we need to promote the value of this change. Is a very important piece to the whole community, not just to those that are underrepresented and underserved in this town. The value to the whole community. We need to promote that for all our families and for our community members. To do otherwise is a disservice, certainly to the future of our children, as well as a disservice to Holliston's future and the town's viability in the region and the state as we move forward. So I appreciate, for example, Ben earlier speaking, Sparrow, that looking to, I think I'm quoting close to what you said earlier, improve the quality of life for all residents, the adequate resources necessary to do that. And I guess got to say, as a member of this community, the powerful community here this evening, with concerns for environmental safety related to the DPW facility, with concern for updating the water infrastructure as we need to do for our future, with concerns for expanding accessibility for elders and children, sidewalks, etc. Those are all part of our future, as is our need to build the capacity to be more welcoming and inclusive for who we are and who we will become. It's all in the same realm, per se. Thanks for listening and thinking critically about the issues we have raised here. I'd like to close by asking what the initial thoughts are about how Holliston can allocate the resources needed for the training and ongoing coaching of the Envisioning Future Holliston Committee and the town's leadership, so that they can be better equipped with the skills necessary to create the change for greater access and diversity, equity, and inclusion that Holliston needs. What are some ideas as to where this funding is going to come from? Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, we're going to proceed to a vote. The motion is that move that an interim update on the town-wide strategic plan development be heard, and it was seconded. I'm not quite sure what the practical effect of a no vote would be on this article, since the update has been heard, but I suppose in principle you might be voting no because you didn't want to hear it, but you've heard it over your objection. So nonetheless, I'll call for vote. All those in favor of receiving the report that you just heard, vote, say aye. And any opposed? So voted. Simple things amuse you as you're up here for a while. Article 27, special legislation, age 65, Group 4, sponsored by Mr. Ahern. To see if the town will vote to authorize the Select Board to petition the General Court for special legislation for Mark Delica, a town of Holliston call firefighter deputy, notwithstanding the provision of any general or special law to the contrary, to serve in such position until age 70, until the date of his retirement or non-reappointment, which occurs first, provided, however, that no deductions from the regular compensation of Mark Delica should be made under Chapter 32 of the general laws subsequent to his reaching age 65 in connection with his service to the town for retirement or pension purposes, provided, however, that the General Court may make clerical and editorial changes of form only to the bill unless the Select Board approves amendments to the bill prior to enactment by the General Court, and to authorize the Select Board to approve such amendments which shall be within the scope of the general public objectives of the petition or take any vote or votes relative thereto. The motion is move that the town authorize the Select Board to petition the General Court for special legislation for Mark Delicate to serve in the capacity of on-call Deputy Fire Chief until the maximum age of 70 as presented in the article. The explanation is as follows, and I'll offer it. The town historically has appointed 2 to 3 on-call deputies for fire/EMS. In January 2023, one on-call deputy position became vacant with a second on-call deputy position referenced in this article becoming vacant due to the age 65 restriction. In April 2023. Both on-call deputy positions were posted by HR and filled in April of 2023. This article, should it be approved by town meeting and subsequently by the legislature, would allow now retired Deputy Mark Delicate to extend his age restriction from 65 to 70 years old, subject to annual health screenings, which allow him to come back after retirement as a third on-call deputy. The town administrator and the fire chief support the article as the age 65 restriction is necessary and important element to public safety, but can be arbitrary depending upon the personal fitness of an individual and the duties and responsibilities assigned. That's why Chapter 32, General Laws Chapter 32 allows exceptions. Deputy Mark Delicate's professionalism and leadership are an asset to the community. Is there a second? Second. You have the motion and the explanation. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. I will say that I note the absence this evening of Henry and Jackie Delica. I hope everything's okay, but I'm sure they're in support of the article and in spirit, and I hope they draw some satisfaction by not only the passage of the article, but the warm reception that the vote received. So my best to both of them. Article 28, road acceptances, sponsored by the Select Board, to see if the town will vote to accept as public way Indian Ridge Road South Station 0+25 to 10+51.55 in the Clearview Estates 2 subdivision as shown on the plan entitled Street Acceptance Indian Ridge South, formerly James Road, Clearview Estates II in Holliston, Mass. Dated March 13, 2014, prepared by Gary and Halnan, Inc., such way having been laid out as townways by the Select Board and taken by eminent domain or take any action relative thereto. The motion is move that the town accept Indian Ridge Road South as a public way as further described in this Article 28 of the warrant. This way has previously been accepted by actions of town meeting and has been subject to prior public hearings by the Select Board per Mass General Laws Chapter 82. The town has acquired this roadway by eminent domain. Is there a second to the motion? All those in favor, strike that. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Article 29, tree bylaw ordinance. I'm not going to read the entire article. It's too lengthy. But the gist of it, thank you. The gist of it is to see if the town will vote to amend its general bylaws by adding a new article, XLVII, entitled Tree Protection and Preservation Bylaw, as set forth in the article. The bylaw in general terms, I suppose, proposes to, as I understand the explanation, as I recall, let me go to that, it may help. The tree ordinance is a requirement component of the town's application to become a Tree City USA community. It builds a basic framework for regulating public shade trees within our street network as well as other town trees under jurisdiction of the tree warden and planning board under the Shade Tree Act, Mass General Law Chapter 87, Section 3, and Scenic Road Act, Mass General Law Chapter 40, Section 15C. It also employs the same thresholds as the longstanding local stormwater management and land disturbance bylaw, Article XLI, under the jurisdiction of the planning board for private property. Implementing regulations will need to follow adoption through a public hearing process in order to develop standards for application and tree replacement. There was, as I recall, a suggestion, Liz, wasn't there, that one of the ages be modified?
That was in the next one.
That's in the next article, not this one?
Yeah,
okay.
Article 30.
The suggested motion is move that the town accept and adopt the general bylaws amendment as printed in Article 28 of the warrant. Is there a second?
29.
Article 29, excuse me. Article 29 of the warrant. Discussion, yes, sir? Oh, yeah, that's the next one, by the age thing.
Good evening again. Devin Howe, 10 Dixon Circle. So when I first read this bylaw, I was actually pretty surprised. I've worked through a lot of municipalities throughout the state, all the way out to out west in Northampton, throughout, really, like I said, the entire state. This bylaw actually struck me as one of the most restrictive tree ordinances I've come across. When I first read it, really went in depth, the first thing I noticed was that it applies to any new subdivision road. So what that would mean is, at least to me, the way I read it, is any housing development would be subject to these regulations. An example that I really went through myself was, if we imagine there's a 1,000-foot long roadway, probably got about 5-6 house lots on either side. Let's say a total of 10 house lots. There would be about, based off some other projects I've seen, you'd see about 100, 120 trees per acre in a forested area. What that would mean for a 1,000-foot long roadway is you'd have about 1 3/4 acres of trees that you would have to remove for construction of these homes. That cost alone would be about $11,000 per house. When you factor in that you have to go in, you have to mark all those trees, you have to replace them in kind, it's an exorbitant cost. And a lot of people like to think that these costs will go back to the developer. The simple reality is it's just not true. Those costs get pushed to homeowners. Many people don't know me. I'm new to Holliston, moved in last June, and housing costs were an extreme burden when we bought our first house, me and my fiance. And when I read this bylaw, what I read is that's an additional $11,000 per house that you would have to spend to buy in the town of Holliston. Then we can factor in, and again, this is the way I interpreted it, was each house lot itself would also need to account for that clearing and mitigation. If you factor in, again, 100, 120 trees per acre, I'm saying it's about $540 per tree to have to pay to mitigate those fees. You're looking at an additional $65,000 of trees that you would have to mitigate for a 1 acre clearing. That in turn would result in an additional, in total, $76,000 worth of tree mitigation per house in a new subdivision in town. I see these costs as, like I said, extremely burdensome, makes it tough for developers wanting to come in, build new homes in Holliston, and drives up the prices of homes in town probably, which is great for people who are currently living in here, but people who want to make their way into town, be a part of this community, it makes it really tough. What it also does, in my opinion, is it encourages other forms of development. I'm not sure if Holliston's seen it quite a bit, but there are 40B projects that they call it, where more or less the developer ignores the town bylaws such as this and can build much higher density homes. So on 10 acres of land, instead of building 10 homes, they might be building 20, 30 plus homes, highly densified, and at which point they can ignore the zoning. What I would encourage is that the town would vote no on this proposed bylaw. I think it is way too restrictive. I don't think it's while it might be good intentioned, I don't think it's, it's not in practice something that I think would be beneficial to the town.
Thank you, sir. Further discussion? Yes?
Mark Whitaker, 543 Central Street. I'm not sure who sponsored this bill or who put it together, but I'm curious, how does this apply to us as residents, as residential owners? Does it apply to us? Does anybody know?
Chris, could you pull up that one slide for me, please? This is not my area of expertise, so I'm going to take a crack at it, and then I'll sit down. And I would recommend, if we don't want to move forward this evening, that we contemplate indefinitely postponing, because I think that this is very important. And so just to speak to the previous gentleman's points, in terms of restrictiveness, we've comped this out to communities, and the intention was to actually not be as restrictive as other communities. You look at a Wellesley, for example, with a tree ordinance. This pales in comparison in terms of the teeth behind it. But so these are generally the highlights that I asked for to be put together for laymen like me as it relates to this article. So it's based on utilizing the guide to local tree bylaws from communities in Massachusetts, which is the DCR Urban and Community Forestry Program document. It is intended to strengthen and customize the Section 14 of Chapter 87 of the Public Shade Tree Act, which speaks essentially to our tree warden, who is our DPW director, Sean Reese. And then also Chapter 40, Section 15C, which is the Scenic Road Act under the Planning Board's general bylaws. Which is, definitions and jurisdiction. I'm going to skip over a couple of these here. So I think generally and then the exceptions in there as well are really anything that goes through the Concom. That's a pretty comparative language that we've seen in other communities as well. The language here is based on a few different areas that were pulled and researched by the Planning and Land Use Department. So the intention here is to not be as restrictive, and that in the areas of private property, for example, which was really the line that we sort of looked at in terms of Wellesley, for example, as being a very restrictive and almost intrusive policy that goes into more private property, that the examples in this policy, I think, was shown in the original slide from the Select Board, is that it does impact, for example, the stormwater management and land disturbance bylaws, which already exist, and that is the instances really where this policy, like those bylaws, touch on private property. One last thing I would just mention is that the impact to subdivision regs, which I think were mentioned earlier, already exists in our subdivision regs as it relates to large trees. So this is meant to work with our existing bylaws as it relates to stormwater and land disturbance, but sort of give us more of a guidelines and four corners to go moving ahead with preserving trees. But certainly the intention is not to be more restrictive than neighboring communities. It's in fact the opposite. So again, I feel like if the discussion this evening is to not move forward, that an indefinite postponement would allow us to address any of those issues and bring it back in October. The timeline on that really is, we would love to have an application in for Tree City USA, and a tree ordinance is a major component of that. But obviously what we want is the bylaws to reflect the community's interest in protecting trees in the community, but not necessarily to overstep on private property by any means. So I hope that answered your question and the original question.
Go ahead, Mr. Whitaker.
So this 10,000 square foot thing, kind of, frankly, that worries me quite a bit. My house is on about 4 acres, and it was a farm at one point in time. And prior to me purchasing it, the previous owners kind of let the woods reclaim the land. And this is all well and good, no problem with that. But that means if I want to try to plant a garden that's, I don't know, say 1/4 acre in size, I'm in violation of this. That bothers me. That's 7% of my property, and I'm in violation.
This is public shade trees, isn't it? I'm sorry. Do you want to respond to that, Tina?
It sounds like Tina's.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll just read directly from the definitions here within the ordinance. A protected tree, to which I think you're speaking about, Mark, I got it right here. Any tree on portions of private land subject to a land disturbance permit. So not building a garden with a diameter breast height of 6 inches or larger. So I think your concern would be if you're pulling a land disturbance permit.
But only if I'm pulling a land disturbance permit, is that correct? So beyond that, I could do, like, so for instance, on my current land, I could just clear cut 3 acres, no big deal. Because I'm pretty sure that would be an objection to somebody who might be in favor of this. So the reason why I'm saying this, I guess, is that also that 10,000 square foot number seems relatively arbitrary over what time? Is that 10,000 square feet today? So I could do another 10,000 square feet tomorrow? What does that mean? I don't know. So because these things seem to be very indefined to me, I'm going to make a motion that we indefinitely postpone this article.
Okay, is there a second? That's open for debate. Mary? Yep, thank you.
Mary Greendale, 198 Highland Street. In the interest of time, I'm not really here to debate. I want to explain that this was not a frivolous request that was like, oh my God, you know, our goal is here to interfere with what everybody wants to do on his or her property. A lot of it is based on both the sustainability concerns in terms of the environment and the fact that we do have what are called legacy trees, that is trees that have been here for 150 years old, that sit pretty close to curbs and that kind of thing, that have been taken down, not deliberately by somebody who wanted to do something with that property. Sometimes the needs of a property owner, all you need to do is have a conversation with them and say, you know, we can do this, we can do that to mitigate the situation. But all of this started rather innocently coming out of America in Bloom 5 years ago, when the conversations turned to trees and how important they are to the environment, how they protect your pavement, how they keep the environment cooler, all of the benefits of doing it. So it was, you know, the macro picture. I understand wanting to look at the micro picture, have no problem if collectively we choose to indefinitely postpone. But this did not start from the standpoint of we want to stop people from doing things on their property. It was quite the reverse of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, sir.
My name's Shaw Lively, 15 Sabina Drive, and I would support indefinite postponement, and I would add a question to be addressed, which is our tree warden is currently the head of DPW, Sean Reese, and I'm wondering what implementing this would add to his duties and the time required to perform the duties of tree warden, and would he have the time to do that and the resources to do it?
Travis, please.
Sure. So I think part of the full tree City USA application, this is one of the major components, but the other ones are having a tree department. I think we're in much better shape now with the changes that were approved by town meeting in the past, where we now have a grounds and tree division within our DPW. And so while we have the DPW director, who is the tree warden and also certified on the water side, we have the highway overall division overseen by Robert Walker, and then within that a foreman now for trees and grounds, and so within that is an entire department supporting the tree warden that sort of did not exist previously. So we've certainly tried to create a system that supports the work moving forward, to not just check a box for Tree City USA by any means, but to put together what is a more sustainable approach to this in the future. We've had great volunteers, obviously, that have done a tremendous amount of work as it relates to trees and sustainability in the community. but we also want to make sure that we have the system in place to support that work and make it sustainable moving forward, sustainable used in a different sense, obviously. And so I think at this point, to answer the question, I do feel our professional staff is set up to support this in the future, but we obviously need the bylaw to be approved by town meeting. And so if we need to indefinitely postpone and bring back to answer the questions related to private property, subdivisions, et cetera, we can certainly answer those questions and be prepared to answer that in October.
Great, thank you. Further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote on the motion to indefinitely postpone. That requires a majority vote. It's been made and seconded. If that motion is successful, then that ends the article. It will be postponed. If that motion is defeated, then we'll proceed to a vote on the main motion. So then, first, please, all those in favor of the motion for indefinite postponement, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? I take a voice for, I think the motion carried. Yeah. It's my sense that it carried, so that motion, that article is indefinitely postponed. We'll proceed to Article 30, no-knock registry, peddling and hawking. I'll give this the same treatment that I gave the previous article. It's a suggested new bylaw dealing with hawkers and peddlers and behavioral standards. It's laid out in detail in the warrant. The motion is move that the town accept and adopt the general bylaws amendment as printed in Article 30 of the warrant with the amendment that in F3 that the age be changed from 17 to 18. And the article sets forth the various categories of individuals and seeks to regulate their ability to knock on our doors and restrict and require a registration and things of that nature. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
The explanation offered is this: a resident request for greater enforcement led to consideration of this change to the general bylaws. Public safety officials were consulted on this language provided by town council and in favor of this language, which will allow better response capabilities when resident complaints are received about peddling and hawking. And it's been defined. I hope you've all had an opportunity to read it. There's a motion made and seconded. Is there discussion? As seeing none, requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Article 31, easement for access and utilities. To see if the town will vote pursuant to General Laws Chapter 40, Section 15A, to transfer from the Select Board for general municipal purposes to the Select Board for general municipal purposes, and for conveying a non-exclusive easement, and to authorize the Select Board to grant a non-exclusive easement for purposes of the improvement, construction, and/or installation of access and utilities in, over, and under the land shown as 30-foot wide access, egress, and utility easement as shown on a plan entitled Easement of Land on Jasper Hill Road, Holliston, Mass., dated April 21, 2023, prepared by Applewood Survey Company Limited, LLC, on file with the town clerk, on such terms and conditions as the Select Board shall determine, including with such restrictions the Select Board may deem appropriate, said conveyance to be for such considerations the Select Board deem appropriate, including nominal consideration, and to authorize the Select Board to enter into and to execute any offers, licenses, temporary or permanent easements, agreements, or instruments as may be necessary for such conveyance, and to expend funds for which may be necessary for professional engineering, architectural services, design, site investigation, testing, preparation and/or demolition, installation, and/or other incidental and related costs, or pass on any vote or take any action relative thereto. The motion is that the town approve Article 31 as written in the warrant. Is there a second? The explanation is as follows. The Select Board will ensure the safe and necessary access is established for people who visit and work in Town Hall. The Select Board will ensure that the Town of Holliston Complete Streets policy will be applied to establish safe access for the new residents to the existing sidewalk network along Washington Street. See Appendix 3 from MAP to be the basis for development agreement between the Select Board and the developer with potential for changes. The quorum required is 100, which we have. The vote required is a 2/3 majority. Do I have a second to the motion? And it's open for discussion. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote, and if it's a unanimous, we'll proceed on that basis. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Now, before we get to Article 32, the last article of the evening, I want to extend my thanks to Attorney Costa, who had joined us here this evening as Town Council. While we haven't called on him this evening to assist me, he and his firm have been of great assistance to the Select Board, the Town Administrator, and to me in putting together and preparing the articles and the motions this evening. I want to extend my compliments to the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen for the obvious hard work they've done during the course of this year, ironing out whatever policy differences or differences of opinion or priorities that they've had to present us with an agenda that I was able to deliver this evening with relative ease because of the fine work that they've done. And I want to give particular thanks again to our Town Administrator, who does a terrific job. He's a wonderful resource that we have, and he makes my job, which is really just to come in and deliver the product that these folks prepare for us. And I want to thank him again for the fine job that he's done this year. And on that basis, I'd like to proceed to Article 32, Stormwater Easement, again sponsored by the Select Board, to see if the town will vote pursuant to Chapter 48, Section 15, to transfer from the Select Board for general municipal purposes to the Select Board for general municipal purposes and for conveying a non-exclusive stormwater management easement, and to authorize the Select Board to grant a non-exclusive stormwater management easement for purposes of the improvement, construction, and/or installation of stormwater management over and under that land shown as stormwater management easement, as shown on a plan entitled Easement Plan of Land, Jasper Hill Road, Holliston, Mass., dated April 21, 2023, by Applewood Survey Company, LLC, on file with the town clerk on such terms and conditions as the Select Board may determine, including any such restrictions the Select Board may deem appropriate. Said conveyance to be for consideration as the Select Board deem appropriate, including nominal consideration, and to authorize the Select Board to enter into and/or execute any offers, licenses, temporary or permanent easements, agreements, or instruments as may be necessary for such conveyance, and to expend funds which may be necessary for professional engineering, architectural services, design, site investigation, testing, preparation, and/or demolition, installation, and all other incidental and related costs, or pass any vote or any action relative thereto. The motion is moved that the town approve Article 32 as written in the warrant. Is there a second? Second. And the explanation is such that stormwater permitting is overseen by the Planning Board and would be a necessary step for this proposed development should town meeting approve this and the previous article. Again, this will require a 2/3 vote. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Second? All those in favor? Aye. So voted. Thank you all for attending, and good night.